Are you trying to burn the forest down, or are you just a pyromaniac? The fire doesn't need feeding right now. what's the excuse for letting the fire go out this time? Freak weather pattern or just complete ineptitude? Fire's looking a little low. Why don't you lay some wood on it?
Hello guys, I hope we're all doing well. Oops, I actually turned on Vanguard's icon. I hope we're all having a great start, great week so far. Hey, good to see you. Max, I hope you're doing well. Carly, look after yourself. I hope you feel better soon. We have the wonderful Vanguard with us today. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, buddy?
Well, what did you want me to say? Oh God, where do I even start with something like that?
Maybe like your name, where people can find you, kind of stuff you do
yeah.
online.
Fair enough. Yep. So I'm Vanguard the Husky. You can find me either under Vanguard Husky or Vanguard the Husky, pretty much everywhere. I'm a streamer, PhD student. Problem for many people.
That sounds like both of us.
It's great being a problem.
It's fun, isn't it? You get to have a bit of a laugh that way.
Yeah, and also like you meet some great people when you're just generally trouble.
Aye, you really do. I mean, look at how we met.
True. Absolute. Oh my God, is that Jack? Hello.
Welcome in, Jack. I hope you're doing well.
But yeah, so well, that's basically all I do. I stream. Thank you for the shout out in the chat. And do the PhD. Those are the two big things I do, basically.
Awesome. So for you guys in chat, I have started up Pokemon Let's Play. So as me and Vanguard are just kind of chatting, feel free to go ahead, It is your usual save, so for folks who haven't seen this before, I have a series of mini games on my streams where folks can play around with things, and occasionally you get to play Pokemon Ruby. On this save, they've not got very far, but they got a shiny on like the first try. I was pissed. But either way, you've got a shiny and you're still traveling around. So, Vanguard, like, this is just a bit of an informal thing, because honestly, like, ever since I found some of your stuff, I found your research really interesting. I've not been in the community as long as others. I've been in for just over 2 years now. But like, I've certainly grown to love it in a lot of areas, and some of the guys who watch me know I'm pretty big on trying to build like safe, fun communities and stuff like that. So I really do enjoy kind of following the stuff that you kind of do. Do you all give a bit of a highlight, maybe?
Oh yeah, I mean, the main thrust of my research, which is, I guess, it's kind of important to, well, very important to someone like you who's newer to the community than I am. It all started basically when I first joined the community, which was, wow, when was it? Oh, about 10 years ago, actually. And one of the things that was kind of like heralded when I joined was basically, oh, the Furry Fandom's a safe space. It's a safe space. So when it came to deciding what to do for the PhD, I basically just thought, is it though? And if it is, what makes it a safe space? So that is essentially my research. My core research is looking at whether the Furry Fandom is a safe space or not.
Yeah, like I know that's certainly something that it got me thinking, because I've always been quite big on that kind of thing, and even before becoming a furry. And I remember sitting at your talk at Confuzzled, and then you were talking about how no one can really define what a safe space is. There isn't really a definition for it, and that definitely gave me a lot of like inflection for the kind of stuff I do, to try and keep like my little corner of the internet safe and that. Like, how would you define that? I imagine that was a real headache of a question you were trying to figure out.
I mean, finding out like a theorist out there in academia who would define a safe space was actually quite easy to find. The problem was how kind of, I guess, vague it was, and how kind of impermanent it was. So although there have been discussions about what makes a safe space, what you need for a safe space, these things are constantly changing, like all the time. And because of that, you have to keep changing the space to make it safe again. And what the result is, as Bladed Pelt said in the chat, like hinted to in the chat, is the community has grown, but yet the changes that have happened outside or within the community haven't been accounted for, reducing the safety within it, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
Or at least inhibiting it, like maybe not reducing it, but making it less of a definitive safe space.
Well, as you said, it's always changing, and particularly with like the sense of online platforms. Like you mentioned that in like your talks, the difference between online and in person. Like, it feels like almost every year there's a new app for furries to get on. Even the time I've been in the fandom, people have gone from like Twitter to Blue Sky to Bark. Apparently there was another one before I joined that I can't remember what it was called. It's like the differences in these apps alone kind of change how you've got to work, in like the differences of how people interact with each other on a virtual level, even before you start meeting in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And the added problem with like the apps is you will find that, I mean, I think it was the case with the previous app. Don't hold me to this in case my information's wrong. But I'm pretty sure the previous furry social app before Bark had kind of problematic people in charge. I think that's what ended up happening. So that's why it ended up collapsing. and you do end up with these problems. This isn't necessarily just a furry thing, obviously. Like, this is a wider problem, but these are a problem. This is a problem that occurs across all communities and ends up collapsing a lot of apps and ends up with problems within the furry fandom in general, actually.
Yeah, I know this is definitely something like I've mentioned to you before. Like, I've got around a bit in terms of communities, having done like a fair bit from scouting to furries to different sports teams and stuff like that. And certainly, like, some of the issues that we do see in the furry fandom that people are like, oh, furries. Like I have said, it's a problem that's everywhere, unfortunately. To try and say, oh, it's just furries is kind of laying a bit of a red herring in some ways. Like, yes, it's present here, but it's not solely here, as you just said. It's in other places as well.
Yeah, to call it just a furry problem is massively disingenuous.
It's just like a big cultural thing, unfortunately. I do wonder if there's something about people, because some furries keep within furry circles and don't necessarily go outside very often. I don't mean outside, like physically outside. I mean outside of like their social circle there. I do wonder if like that's got something to do with it, and that's what leads them to like the thought that it's only a furry thing because they don't necessarily see it elsewhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that most definitely could be a contributing factor. I mean, I'm very much of well, this isn't an academic perspective, by the way. This is more of a personal take, but I think you're only ever made richer by meeting new people. So
I would agree with that. Yeah,
I think you kind of miss a lot if you just keep to yourself and just to a very particular group of people. I think you end up missing quite a lot that way.
Yeah, it's definitely better. It's easier to get a broader perspective. The more people you meet with, the more outlooks. This is a personal opinion, although I'm not an academic like you are, Vanguard. I would say even necessarily meeting some of these more toxic people and stuff like that, as much as it's a negative experience in most cases, it does help you kind of broaden your perception of what not to be, at least, and how things can get damaged, like how people can get hurt from these things.
Yeah, and as thatn Max said as well, it's going outside the comfort zone can feel very intimidating, and that's absolutely true. But the thing is, like, everything's not a comfort zone at some point. And like taking that step, like going back to what you were saying earlier, Materies, taking that step from going from being online as a furry to being in person as a furry is an intimidating step.
Yeah, it was definitely. I remember the first time I went. Like, and some folks here know the story of how I got in. I was a bit of a stereotypical. Have you ever played D&D? I realise this sounds a bit offhand, but
of course.
So, are you aware of the stereotype of you have to be a furry to play Tabaxi?
No, although I get it.
So that is a fairly common joke within the D&D community. One I used to argue quite vividly against. However, I literally became that person. I became a furry because I played Tabaxi in D&D. And so, like, I initially found people after looking out online, because I was looking for D&D out of Tabaxi, so you can see how that got me here. And talking to people on Discords and that, and then going to my first fur meet. Like, I'm normally a fairly confident person, fairly outgoing. I was still pretty worried on that train down, like heading over to London for that meet. I was really nervous, and I'm more outgoing than most folks, so it's definitely, you can see how people get even scared in some levels of that first social interaction.
But then it turns out to be like fine.
Yeah.
and that's just that's just the way of it. And Jack, I've just seen your drinking helps you be social. I mean, it's that does help for a lot of people. I mean, I used to drink very heavily, but this is before becoming a furry, actually, or before discovering I was a furry, to be more specific. But I don't really drink now, as Jack, as a friend of mine, actually knows. Just because it doesn't appeal to me. I'm outgoing enough without it. I do disagree with you, Jack, that tabaxis suck. Tabaxis are great.
Yes, I saw that comment. I had to bite my tongue for a moment. It's not a good idea for the streamer to start insulting people in the chat.
Oh, I do it all the time. And the thing is, you speak of D&D, but in my current campaign, I'm playing a Harengan, so I'm playing a rabbit.
Ooh.
So
I've played both of them before. They're fun.
They are quite fun, especially their kind of initiative and their kind of perception stuff is insane.
What do they get for their initiative?
They get like a huge bonus to initiative. I think like my initiative bonus is +6 or something. It's like nuts.
Holy damn! Okay, that's kind of nuts. My Tabaxi has a higher one, but only because he's got the alert feat. The alert feat like boosts it to something stupid.
Ooh, I might look into that feat. Make my
the
initiative worse.
The alert feat gives you a +5 to initiative.
That's cool.
Like looping, my character has a +10, and another person in the party who he's in has +9. So it's very rare that it's not one of us two going first.
Makes it easier to coordinate.
Oh, absolutely. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted. Carry on with your point.
No. I think that was my point. But bouncing off of what Pet Video Restaurant just said, felt very welcome when interacted with the Furry Fandom. Yeah, that's one common thing that's come out in my research generally is that whether or not the Furry Fandom is a safe space or not, which I don't feel like I'm quite far enough along yet to definitively answer that. I can definitively say it's welcoming because that's literally the overwhelming response that's come out of my interviews and my data and the reading I've done is that one thing it seems to be almost universal across the Furry Fandom that it's very welcoming. I'm not sure exactly what that means some of the time, but the fact it is a kind of universal statement does speak to a lot, and I think that's why a lot of folk would say that the Furry Fandom is a safe space, simply because it feels welcoming, but those two aren't the same thing.
Yeah, like just because a safe space is welcoming doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe. Like there can still be hazards within a space that makes you feel welcome. It is a bit of a easy mistake to like confuse the two, but like there is a distinction. I can certainly get why your research said that though. Like I know I said I was nervous. I was when I went to my first one, but I fell into a group of people almost immediately. I've been talking to some of them on Discord before I went. I got there and almost immediately, I went to the newcomers table first at that meet, but I went to see them afterwards. Almost immediately, I was just sat there. Each of us were drinking our hands, just casually chatting along. It almost felt like we'd been doing it for weeks, not like the first time I'd done it, which was really nice. Like, I won't say that there was never any negative experience, but for the most part, for me at least, coming into the fandom to start off with, from the fandom's perspective, was actually really easy and really welcoming. But I do also, like, so the things I've wondered before now is, like, and this was probably inevitable to come up, was the thing about like gender identity and sexual orientation, stuff like that. As like a cis white male, I was unlikely to really get any negativity, I think, coming into the fandom compared to other minorities that might do.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that the fandom really does need to work on, from a fairly objective standpoint, is the quite heavy race problem with the furry fandom. That there's a lot of racism in the furry fandom.
That is unfortunate and sad to hear. Unfortunately, I can't say I'm surprised, but it is still sad to hear.
And also, Mad Max, I'm also sorry to hear that. And but that does kind of link to another problem in the furry fandom, is really the lack of accountability. I think this came up at like a Fuzzle talk, which you were at, Materies. Was there is this problem with accountability in the fandom, where folks just aren't held as accountable as you would expect, from something that's seen as so happy and welcoming and friendly. It seems to be that with kind of pushing aside of the darker aspects, which really should be brought to light and kind of confronted.
Yeah, there's definitely issues. So I won't go into a ton of details on this because I've no particular interest in starting drama with certain people within the fandom, but I did used to staff at a meet, and I actually walked away for reasons not too dissimilar to this. So if it was personal, I was in the middle of trying to buy a house, and said meet was a long way away from me, so it was difficult to get there anyway. But working with some individuals and their behaviour was not behaviour that I was comfortable with or happy working with. And I've certainly seen it in others. Again, to give some context, I've ran events before, not like fur meets, but I've helped run dance shows. I've helped organise HEMA tournaments and stuff like that. So I have a little bit of experience when it comes to these things and how to interact with the public and how to behave professionally to a certain level. And occasionally you do see people behaving in ways that are inappropriate. And unfortunately, as you have just talked about with accountability, there's nothing to hold them accountable for the way they behave, and so these things are just allowed to happen. We do sometimes see call-out posts, but my issue with call-out posts, I'd be interested to see what you think about these from an academic point of view, Vanguard. Obviously, don't answer this if you're not comfortable, but like, are they necessarily beneficial? I think it's good to warn people of potential toxicity, but I feel like sometimes the call-out posts themselves are not necessarily helping the situation.
I would agree with that. Mostly for the purpose that call-out posts are very singular in effect. So sure you can put out a call-out post about someone, and you'll probably be incredibly justified in doing so, but you'll only hit a social media platform, maybe, and that means a lot of the people that would really benefit from knowing that information won't know it, and that person just can continue to act the way they do, whatever behavior that is, and then continue to go to fur meets and continue to go to like VR chat meets, instances, or wherever they go. unabated because they've not been stopped in any tangible way. So I think they can work, but the way that they're done most of the time, they won't.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with that. Like, on the side of how it can be dealt with from like an event point of view, as someone who, as I said, has ran a few, in the defense of some meets, it can be very difficult because you can't act well without evidence. Like, if someone accuses someone else of something, you can't necessarily just go right the band just because one person has said so, because there are people, unfortunately, who put in false accusations just to hurt each other. It's sad and pathetic, but unfortunately there are. Now, that doesn't mean that you sit and do nothing. There are things you can do to try and keep everyone safe, but part of the issue is like trying to look at this from a more objective way. The way I see it is, it's almost as if the fandom itself is a problem, in the sense of, because anyone can go and run a Furmy, anyone can run a Furmy. So that's great because it like helps build the fandom, but it's a problem because not everyone necessarily knows how to handle these situations, and I feel like that can also end up make it worse sometimes, because poorly handled situations leave more people feeling sour, and unfortunately that then leads to further call out posts and such that can make things like deteriorate from there.
Yeah, and you could argue that for the furry fandom generally, because the furry fandom almost entirely is community ran.
Yeah.
There is a kind of economy to it, but the economy of the furry fandom is entirely within the furry fandom. It's not realistically beholden to a kind of external source like, say, a Comic-Con would be. So, for instance, a Comic-Con is not obviously infallible, but it's more likely to be able to kind of snuff out problems quickly because of the way it's run and the organization of it, and the fact it is just a group of professionals putting this on. Not saying, obviously, fur meets and fur cons, etc., it's not professionals putting them on. It's just there is a level of once again, it comes back to accountability there. At least people within that organization having, say, DBS checks and the sort of legal kind of steps you have to go through to put on a quote-unquote safe event.
Yeah, you've got your DBSs, which are usually for when dealing with minors, but also vulnerable adults and such. You've got your insurance. A lot of people don't think about that, but events need to have insurance of various kinds. And the amount of planning that goes into them that you don't think about it. Everything from fire safety, what's the maximum number of people you can have on site, to in case of emergency events and such, like more dire situations that I'd rather not get into. Like, all of this is stuff that has to be planned, and there are procedures put in place to try and handle different situations. And so if there is like a safeguarding incident, for example, and you report it to a member of staff, usually that member of staff themselves cannot handle that safeguarding incident. So it gets reported higher up, and there's a process in place to try and guarantee everyone's safety. Most fur meets don't have that, simply because, as you just said, it's community ran, and most people don't know these things. Some of the bigger conventions like Confuzzled, hazarding a guess, probably do, because of the size of the event. They likely wouldn't be able to operate without having these procedures in place, though that's me hazarding a guess. but most your average fur meets simply aren't. They are usually just a group of people hanging out, which in of itself, like, isn't a bad thing. And I'd argue, like, it is nice and a positive side. But unfortunately, when something moves from just being friends hanging out to a public event that you're inviting people to, you have to start looking at it a very different way. And it's not very intuitive to automatically know that.
Yep, I'd agree with all of that. And also to kind of jump back to a point that was made in the chat as well. Some of the bad actors are very good at. Well, I don't mean this in a I am congratulating them way. Just they are good at what they do. They are good at that manipulation. They are good at that turning folk against each other. They're good at that sort of thing. So it makes it difficult to close in on that behavior simply because they're good at avoiding that accountability. So those sorts of people, they are going to be difficult to size, basically. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
I would completely agree with that, yeah.
I just don't think call-out posts are the best way of doing that. Just because, as I said, like you're not getting enough people seeing it, because once you take into account algorithms and stuff like that, it's not gonna. It probably won't reach all of the people that sort of information needs to reach.
And I think just not to try and generalize things, but the general look and the way that most people will approach call-out posts, I just feel personally isn't necessarily going to be conducive to improving the situation. Like, if it was me in that situation, it would be it's very difficult to say what you would do because it varies from situation to situation. But I would more likely maybe warn people personally and just say, look, here's the issues I had. I can't tell your mind for you. It's for you to decide what you want to do with this information. Because realistically, you can't tell people what they should and shouldn't do, who they should and shouldn't support and stuff like that. While I think there are certainly people as a community we can agree, or certain types of people we can agree we shouldn't support, when you start actively, as you said, with the call-out posts, it's not necessarily... You run the risk of creating as much toxicity as you are removing with that post, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, through the pushback or the defense of that individual you get, yeah, it would end up creating far more toxicity than necessary. I mean, you're completely right. There are some furs that I think we could all agree on in terms of shouldn't be anywhere near the fandom. But then there's obviously there's also the factoring in as well, the international aspect of the fandom. Like, there's not like, I'm not going to know an American fur from another. If there's a particular American fur who's a huge problem in American circles, I'm not necessarily going to know them if they come to a UK con, for instance. Despite them being a problem and despite there being, for whatever reason, and despite there being a lot of knowledge out there about it, I'm not necessarily going to know them from Adam. And that, and also there's the fact that sometimes it just doesn't work. Like, no matter how many times folks are ostracized or like exposed to the folk they really are, some people just won't give up and will just keep going anyway.
Yeah, there's definitely a level of that. Although I don't think that's necessarily again, going back to what we were saying near the start, it's not necessarily a problem only in the furry fandom. But you do meet sort of narcissists and stuff like that in society, so you get them in every community, and just like any other, we unfortunately get on the furry community. And some of these people really do just genuinely see themselves as a victim no matter what's happened. So yeah, as you say, if they go somewhere new, the people there have no way of realistically knowing what they've done or who they are, especially I hope your tattoo went well, Rutav. How'd it go? Sorry, I got sidetracked for a moment there, Vanguard. That happens very often.
That's fine. That's completely fine.
Especially if they make a new Sona. So this was another thing you were talking about in your talk, where like the anonymity people have, not the anonymity, how easy it is to stay anonymous with us all using our personas as kind of like a front, particularly online. If someone is a problem and they go somewhere new and they make a new Sona, it can be very difficult to recognize said person, because in most cases we know each other by our Sona names.
Yep. Very quickly, head video restaurant. Thank you for the compliment. Thank you. I mean that is well, as you said, that's something that came up in the talk. The use of the anonymity of the persona to be able to essentially just escape and kind of hide from accountability, which does happen. I mean, quite often the kind of bigger issues in the fandom, they do get found out if they make a new persona. It does eventually get tracked back to them, but online especially, it's very easy to hide behind that. It's a lot harder offline, because you still have a face, but well, a human face. So but yeah, the online, being able to literally just go, okay, I scrubbed that entire persona off the face of the earth, I'm this now. Until that gets found out, you've essentially just clean slated yourself.
Pretty much. So I feel like that is the dream of many a furry, to be able to take on the face of your persona, actually live in your Sona's skin for a while. I imagine if there was the blue pill, red pill meme going around, a lot of furries would jump at that opportunity.
Oh, me too. Like, I'm included in that.
Yeah, I would
and
as
jump
well.
Back to,
yeah.
So go on.
No, carry on.
I was going to say, response to Bladed Pelt. I agree. Because the furry fandom is, and I've said this before in one of my talks. I think I said it was either in Scotia or in Confuzzled when I did the talk at Confuzzled last year. Furry is cringe. Furry is weird. Like, that's fine. That's okay. But there is instances, as Bladed Pelt's pointed out, where that openness and weirdness of the fandom is used as a vehicle, or worse, as a shield to protect them from criticism in the things that they do. So, like, there are certain. I mean, I'm not gonna get into this. It's a horrible topic to get into, but there are certain activities that some furs do that are, for one, illegal, and for two, are frankly immoral on top of that, even if they weren't illegal. But yet they use the furry, that they use the fact they're a furry as a kind of, this is fine because this is what furry is, and it's like, no, it's not. For one, how bold of them to make a claim as to what furry is. Even I can't do that. I've been studying furries for 5 years.
Yeah,
Norma's need a harder question.
Yeah, say what is normal? Because the thing is, like, on that note, on the normal, like, being furry is normal for us. I know people, like, as you said, it is cringe in that, but for us, it's our normal, isn't it? Like, being cringe, being a little bit weird and such is our normal. whereas it's obviously not for folks outside of the community. So it does make me laugh a little bit on these things, because it's like there is no normal. At the end of the day, even if we look outside of the furry fandom, let's put it this way. If you have someone from a lower class area in poverty and you put them in a higher class area and they get to live in that area for, I don't know, a month, that's not going to be normal to them. They're going to be like over the moon because they suddenly don't have to worry about having a roof over their head for the next month, or they don't have to worry about not being able to afford food, and vice versa. And fuck the collar. Damn it, head. But yeah, and in vice versa, and people from more well-off backgrounds in poverty are not going to see that as normal either. So it's like, you can't, how do you define normal at all?
I would just say it's individual.
Yeah.
Whatever anyone sees as normal is normal for them, and therefore that's normal. It's the same as weird. Anything that someone says is weird to them. It's more of a opinion than a fact, I would say. What you see as normal might not be the same as someone else, and what you see as weird may not be the same as someone else. It's all subjective. What becomes a problem with that is when people are just like, this is not normal and that is a fact. I'm like, no friends, that's not how it works.
It's very subjective, isn't it? Like, again,
yeah.
Even just little things like looking in different countries and stuff like that. Our British culture will be very different to, say, Japanese culture. If put either side in the other one's culture, and they're gonna go, that's weird, because as you say, it's not normal for them.
Yep. And I'd say it's the same. And I would argue, and I think someone else has argued. I can't remember who argued it. Oh yes, I remember. It was Courtney Plant from Fur Science, one of the furry academics. Said that there's as many definitions for furry as there are furries, because what it is to be furry is hugely individual. It's all subjective, which makes my job harder. But I guess I relish the challenge, or I'm glutton for punishment, whichever way round you want to put it.
I think that was probably one of my favourite parts of your talk at Confuddled. Like, I really liked everything you were talking with the safe spaces and such. But it's like trying to define a furry. Like, what is it for different people? Why do different people get into it? And trying to explain it. I think a lot of furries have been in this situation where a non-fur has asked them, what is being a furry like? And you try and explain it. And it's of course different for everyone, as you were just saying. The way I describe it now is you want to know what a fursona is. A fursona is just a D&D character without stat block. Because that's basically what it is. We design a character, our likes, our dislikes, what we do, our story, our lore, and so on. Well, that's part of what it is for me as someone who likes creating stories and games and stuff like that. Or someone else who's more into, say, the fursuiting and that, they may give one that's based more on the fursuiting sides.
Yep. And it's the way that I've attempted to describe it to folks that aren't a fur is and especially if they're a gamer, is much easier to explain. Imagine a character creator where the options are limitless. Because you have the only limit of what your persona looks like is you.
That's very true. Like, the insane creativity that we have in this community is absolutely mind-boggling. I know we see a lot of common things, like wolves are pretty common, I know. I still like to think I'm unique. But you start looking at sort of the more out there saunas. I remember there was a spider sauna at Confuzzled, and I remember talking to others who have like aliens and shapeshifters and all sorts, and some people like mix animals and such. Like the creativity in terms of like, as you say, it really is. How far can your imagination go? Like, what do you want to do with it? I feel like gamers, at least ones who aren't preset in their ways and do it, like the gaming community is probably its own PhD into like investigation into that. But I feel like gamers are probably going to be a little more flexible and open to these concepts because they're going to be used to playing as different characters in video games already.
I say yes and no. Because I'd say there's elements of both. Because gamers are both quite open and also incredibly closed-minded.
Yeah, that is very true. It's usually.
I mean, all you need to
one way
do
or
is
the
look
other.
at. Yeah, all you need to do is look at what's upset gamers today, and you've got a really clear example then of what's going on.
Yeah, maybe I was being a little preemptive with that.
Well, no, I mean, like I'd say it's just as valid a. It's literally just as valid a kind of view on it as any, and one thing I've found is that thank you for the hugs, Wolf Warrior. Is like the papers I've given so far at academic conferences have generally been at game studies conferences because my kind of secondary interest is game studies. So I have found a way to make game studies furry because of course I did. So it's been well received, like generally, which is amazing. To be fair, it is amazing. It's been so well. So well received by game studies, generally speaking. But as you just replied to Blade Pell, furry has everything in it. So if you're not creative, that's fine. Because the thing is, there's enough creatives in the furry fandom. If you need help kind of like deciding on your persona and kind of pulling it together, there's enough artists out there and creative furs and stuff to help you with that. And most of the time the persona is created by committee. Not always, of course, but generally your persona is created by interacting with other people, whether that be artists or interacting with other furries, and it's those kind of conversations which end up kind of forming your persona. Not all the time, I said, but generally it is that kind of creation by committee sort of thing.
Yeah, we all kind of have a hand in shaping each other, don't we? Like a weird thought has just occurred, kind of like off the basis of that. I might be talking out of my utter ass here, but I know one of the aspects in like furry fandom is it's largely LGBT, largely neurodivergent and such like that. And as such, a lot of folks have kind of been like, I don't know if ostracized is the right word, but made to feel apart from normal society. And like coming into the furry fandom, when we help build each other's personas, it's almost like we're helping to build each other up in a certain way, which probably links back to the welcoming aspect that you were saying earlier. It like welcoming people in, helping them get started with like making their sonas and stuff, and helping them feel more normal for them. Again, going back to what is normal conversation, making them feel more normalized for who they are as being part of the community.
Yeah, and then you might not necessarily stay with that persona. Or that persona may develop over time based on new interactions with people, or in the case of, say, a video, if I've interpreted the message correctly, you could have multiple personas which are inspired by, or I kind of have that inspiration from different areas, different people. It's and it's one of the things that's ended up taking a lot of my time, to be fair, on the PhD. It's one of the unique and interesting things about the furry fandom, that there is this kind of communal aspect to how these interactions and kind of how these personality kind of traits play out.
Yeah, like, I'm not gonna lie, I really don't envy you for like the challenge you've had. Like, first off, doing this as a PhD, like, I know you said you've had a lot of support, but I imagine, like, it must have been almost a little bit like maybe intimidating or whatever when you first put in that proposal. But I do feel like you doing this and the few other academics we have studying the furry community and the furry history, like, it are really doing the community a lot of good, I feel, as it just helps us understand each other a little bit, I feel.
I mean, it's good to hear that, for one. I will say that. And I can promise you that's felt. And the reason I can definitively and definitely say it is felt is because each time I've done one of these talks at Confuzzled or Scotia, it's always been very well received and attended, despite being quite a niche thing. Folk want to see this sort of thing, and want to see this sort of kind of focus from a place of improvement. Like, the reason I'm doing this and the reason others are doing it is not only to kind of like examine the furry fandom and kind of give it a little spotlight on it, because it's been around for a really long time and kind of deserves it, but also to kind of start going, right, okay, here's the problems. Something needs to be done about these.
Absolutely. I think it helps us out. I was really happy to see. I've only been to Confuzzled. That was my first con, but I was really happy to see that was well attended. I've got to say, in the past, when it's come to other communities that I've been a part of, when it's come to kind of topics of self-reflection and similar, other communities are nowhere near as involved in these things. Your talk on kind of like chasing tails and such was far better received and like viewed than like I think the same thing for other communities would have, which did partly help me feel better. It helped me feel like we can actually tackle some of these problems. But more than that, I feel like it won't just help us from an internal point of view. I feel it'll help us externally as well. Unfortunately, furries do have still a pretty negative connotation externally. And I feel, and unfortunately, some media representation, stuff like that, doesn't help, along with those few but unfortunately loud bad actors. So having this sort of more academic and slightly normalized take on the furry fandom can be used to help non-furs understand what we are a little bit. Like, it's not just a fetish thing, it's not just walking around in like a carpet. Like, it's a whole community for a lot of different people. and they don't necessarily need to like it or anything, but I feel like some of the negativity folks have towards us is that lack of understanding of what furry is. So that's some of what the things that I would like to see out of this. So, because I feel like that would also benefit a lot of people who, again, are afraid of being who they are. This will probably be like no new news to like closet LGBT people and stuff like that. But being able to openly say, yeah, I'm part of the furry fandom. In my personal life, everyone knows I'm a furry. I don't hide it, and if anyone has a problem with it, I make it known that I don't give a shit. But I'm fairly confident, and I'm lucky that most of the people around me don't really care. Not everyone's in that position, and I feel like it would do a lot of people a lot of good if they don't have to like suddenly try and hide it again once they leave a furmy. They shouldn't have to like, let's say a furmy is a safe space. Once they leave that furmy, they shouldn't feel like they're no longer in a safe space just for who they are. So I would like, that's what I'm hoping for this. I feel like this could benefit the community both externally as well as internally.
I mean, I hope so. I mean, one of the reasons why I am doing this is to combat that stigma. So I hope so. And on that note as well, to return to something Blade and Pelt said as well, the thing about doing this sort of like logical, introspective look on the furry fandom as a furry myself, it's not only taught me a lot about the fandom and a lot about myself, but also realistically, I'm never going to be done. Because the fandom will keep changing, and therefore the conclusion I end up on when I finish my PhD next year and publish that and whatever, that may not necessarily remain true for very long. Which means I'll need to return to it and kind of keep refining it and keep looking at the fandom. So really, I'm in this for the long haul now, I feel. Now I've been here for enough years, I might as well I might as well stick around.
Give me a second.
Never.
Absolutely. And I feel like you might be a little hard on yourself to say your thesis might be completely wrong in a few years. It's like, yes, it might be wrong for that period of time, but it would still be right for the period it was released, and it would still be part of like furry history at this point. Like you and the other academics who are like building up the timeline and kind of like understanding how furry has like grown from where it was, say, 10 years ago to now. I feel like things like your thesis will still have a big part to play in that, even if it's no longer up to date. Like, it's still going to be part of that journey for how people can see it's changed over time. Like, maybe that's just me being naive, but like, that's the way I would see it. But absolutely, like, I can see why you're in this for a long haul, and honestly, you've got my mad respect for this, because I would struggle to commit to something for that long, of like that kind, and genuinely, I really do believe that what you're doing will really benefit the community.
I mean, I'm really glad to hear that, and to be honest, like I'm heavily ADHD, so the fact that I've committed to this for so long, it shows how, and well, really, it's because I'm so passionate about doing it, and I see the worth and the value in doing it. And yeah, as you say, and also Blade and Pelt said as well. I know, like, even when my work does become outdated in particular views, there's not going to be. It's not going to. It will still. Well, yeah, as you said, it will still be part of that journey. It will still be part of that explanation, that cataloguing of almost like a snapshot of what furry is right now.
Give me one moment.
Never a rush.
Yeah, I can totally get that. Yeah, like on another note, I can totally relate to the ADHD. Turns out I'm really ADHD as well. Only kind of came to realize that in like the last 12 months or so, partly from being a furry. So honestly, just even more respect on that front, because I know how hard it is to like stick to something for long periods of time. But that's the thing, isn't it? Once your mind is on it, like once you've found that passion, you just never really let it go, do you? It's always on your mind. You're always thinking about it from like the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. At least that's how I function. So if you're about to say that's not, then maybe I've got something else wrong with me.
Oh no, absolutely. I have a well, I'm on to my second one now, but I have a research journal that basically I carry with me everywhere, and it basically just put stuff in it whenever I think of it. And the fact I'm on to my second book in the last couple of years, it says a lot about how much I think about the furry fandom.
Yeah.
And I get the ideas like when I'm at fur meets or at fur cons or whatever, and I'll basically just write it down straight away, because there's so many things, so many kind of interesting things that the furry fandom's doing that other fan groups or other communities just don't do, and it just they aren't seemingly focused on. So it's nice to be the person going, but how about this? This is a really interesting thing that this community's doing.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, that I sometimes end sentences with "yeah," which doesn't help.
No, that's completely fair. It's definitely, like I said, interesting from someone who's been in other communities, even ones that are meant to be more regulated to a certain extent, like scouting, for example. Working with minors and being what it is, it's obviously got a lot more regulations and processes for the way we work. But even so, like, certainly I wouldn't feel that scouting's anywhere near as self-reflective as it should be, and nowhere near as self-reflective as the furry fandom is on a whole. I certainly feel like the community, if it was its own entity, so to speak, while it has its problems, it's at least aware of those problems, which other communities don't necessarily feel as aware of them. Certainly, to use scouting again, as a lifelong scout who has been in scouting for over 20 years, I would certainly say there are issues there that most folks in there don't seem to be quite aware of, which can be a little worrying sometimes. So, as much as the furry fandom has its issues, it's at least reassuring to see some level of self-reflection.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and it's the same with the gaming community as well. With not seeing the wood for the trees in terms of the problems. The only thing that would kind of push it over the edge is if the furry fandom actually did something about it. Some of the time. Let's say it doesn't, but like seeing the problems is different than doing something about them.
Yeah, it's kind of like that half the battle thing, isn't it? Seeing it is half the battle, and that's a good thing. But you've still got to finish the other half of the battle, which is doing something about it. Like, taking the first step, which is always a good move, but you've then got to keep walking. You can't take a step and be like, right, I've done the hike.
Yeah, otherwise you've not finished what you started. And Jack, to answer your question, there's not enough pages in my book about you, considering how long I've known you for. I'll say that much.
How long have you and Jack known each other out of interest?
I think Jack was one of the first people I met. Not the first. Online in the for those that this is going to be this is going to unlock a core memory for. In the Rusted Bolt, which was a kind of, it was almost like a online kind of pub roleplay environment that was on the UK Fur forums back in the day. The UK Fur forums still exist, but they're not used very much. But yeah, met then Jack in person in 2016, which was a year or so later, after speaking in the Rusted Bolt. So yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, that's definitely a major cornerstone of the community, the people we meet and the folks we hang out with and stuff like that. I don't know if I've said this before, but I wouldn't have still been here if it hadn't been for some of those first people I met. It's actually a bit of a funny story for when I first joined. So you know how I said I went to my first fur meet down south?
Yes.
I went there. I didn't tell anyone from my real life associates that I was going. Because I've been enjoying talking to folks and stuff like that and hanging out and such. So I thought, okay, let's go to this fur meet. If I enjoy myself, great, I'm a furry. If I don't enjoy myself, I am leaving and never mentioning this to anybody. But no, I went there and actually had an amazing time, and still genuinely, even though I've not spoken to some of them in quite a while, I still remember a lot of the folks who first spoke to me and first welcomed me into the community. So like, there's definitely that strong community bond there, isn't there?
Yeah, and I would definitely say that those first few people you meet in the fandom are basically integral, because they will change, like that will kind of set you on the path of how you start in the fandom, and therefore those first few people you meet are literally so important.
They really do help you shape your initial view of the community, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like the first, like, I mean, it says a lot that out of the, say, first half a dozen furries that I met when I joined the fandom, I still speak to you now.
Yeah, like there's definitely something there. I do feel bad for folks who might have had less negative, less positive starts, but having those folks who you still talk to. Funnily enough, it's interesting. Seth's just joined, actually. Seth was the first furry streamer that I interacted with, and we're still friends now. And that really, like, it really says a lot when you're still maintaining those friendships. They're usually quite far distance as well. I don't know about you, but I don't, bar one person who works at the same place as me, I don't know any furries that are close to me. It's all kind of like fairly long distance, so it really means a lot to be putting into those friendships at that point.
Yeah, and as that Mad Max says, that's exactly it. That's why the first people you meet in the fandom is so important, because it can it can completely colour and change the way that you view and the way that you interact with the fandom, for better or worse, depending on depending on who you meet first, and that genuinely is both great and also sucks simultaneously.
Yeah.
So it's such luck. It's such luck of the draw. But that's
really
the same with any
is,
community. To be fair.
It is the same with any community. And just on a side note, to answer your question, Bladed, I might have ruined it, unfortunately. After I made a certain move in a D&D game, the first time I played my Tabaxi Ranger looping might have been the thing that put Prof off ever being a furry. And I will tell you that story offline, because I'm not telling it online. It'll make some people uncomfortable. Safe to say I can get creative when it comes to solving problems in D&D. But yeah, it really can. Like, those first people you met, and I know other folk who have had some really negative experiences in the fandom, but some of them still stick around. I've got to say, that is something that I think is really good. They're willing to stick, even though they know, like, they've been through some pretty awful experiences. The fact that they stick around the community because they know that's not the whole community and they still want to see the good there. Like, I think that is also something that deserves respect in my mind, because you would have every right after going through something horrible to, like, pack it in and look back and hold such a negative view of the community, but to, like, still be there and seeing the good side, it shows a real strength of character, personally, I think, compared to what your other options might have been.
I agree, and also just it's a kind of acceptance and an understanding that all furry spaces will be different. You're not going to have the same experience. Well, to use a few examples that we've already discussed, you're not going to have the same experience at a fur meet as a FurCon, or in the Rusted Bolts, an RP bar on a forum versus VR chat. There's all of these experiences are going to be different. You're going to interact with loads of different people that are going to also interact with those spaces in different ways. And kind of to repeat what I said earlier, the whole problem with accountability really needs to be kind of really addressed in the fandom. But conversely to it only takes one bad space to kind of colour your view. It only takes one good space to kind of start to not fully repair ever. That's too much of a pipe dream. But to start to repair that damage, or start to recover from that damage, it only takes the one correct person or one correct space to kind of start changing, or start kind of altering that view.
It's starting that healing process, isn't it? Like, if you have been hurt, unfortunately, you're never going to just be like... It's like when people would say, oh, you're just not focusing problem. Oh, I'm sorry. That's fixed all my problems. No, it's a case of, like, starting the healing process, isn't it? And slowly getting back in there. But the fact that you're making that start, it is that first step. Like, starting the journey. You've got to finish it, but the start is arguably the most important bit, because you're never going to get to the end otherwise.
Yeah, and also to kind of draw it back to safe spaces for a second. Safety is individual. If you feel safer in a smaller group of people at a FurCon, fine. If you basically just want to go to a FurCon and spend your entire time at that FurCon with like 2 or 3 people that you feel safe around, that's your safe space, and that is safe for you, which is completely fine. And you should be more than entitled to have that space and be left alone in that space.
Absolutely. To kind of go to another point, it was brought up briefly. I meant to address it earlier, but we moved on to other things. The view around alcohol in the community. A lot of people like to drink, and nothing wrong if they like to drink, but I do feel like there's a thing in the community, and this isn't just the community, I think this is society on the whole. It just carries into the community, as with many other issues, that drinking is a requirement sometimes. I know quite a number of times I will offer to buy people a drink just because, like, if we're chatting or whatever, like if they've got the last round or whatever, I will offer to buy a drink. And a number of times people have said, "Oh, sorry, I don't drink alcohol," and it's like, for me personally, if I'm offering to buy you a drink, I'm not offering to buy you an alcoholic drink. I'm offering to buy you a drink, like anything, whether it's a cider to like a glass of lemonade. There's kind of this view that it always has to be alcohol, and I feel like that is something that could also do with being addressing. Not to say that folks can't drink, but just this kind of almost unwritten rule that it's always got to be a drink.
Jack drinking right now, which is not a surprise at all. I mean, what doesn't help with this is that a lot of UK first spaces are in a space that has alcohol as a focus. So a lot of fur meets tend to happen in bars or pubs. Fur cons will usually happen in a place that has a big bar area, for other reasons than just drinking, just because space is good. But these spaces end up being in places that do have alcohol as a focus, which does, I think, contribute to that problem.
This is why I think, though, it's not necessarily a furry problem. I think it's society on the whole, at least in the UK, because that's how a lot of things do it. Look at pub quizzes, for example. It's literally in the name, pub quiz. When people of our age tend to hang out, when we say, well, go for a drink, do we default to a coffee place, or are we defaulting to pub when someone says drink? Like, you think of, if you want to start an event, it could be any kind of event. Where's the easiest place for you to be able to run an event? Say you want to run a D&D night. Well, most people are going to think of a bar because it's one of the easiest places for them to go do it. So it is absolutely, I think you're right. It's partly the location, but I think it's partly the ease of running events at those locations that is also part of the issue. For me personally, I would just like to see, even in those bars, like bars serve soft drinks, for example. You can get fruit juice in some bars, yet people still think in a bar, if you offer to buy them a drink, alcohol. So, just for me personally, if I would like to see like all of culture, but furries more as a focus, like just have that consideration. If drink doesn't have to be alcoholic. Maybe I'm putting a little bit too much of myself on that one, but it would certainly be something I would like to see.
I mean, your opinion is just as valid as anyone else's, so don't sell yourself short on that one. But like, as Jack will corroborate, I'm not a drinker. I may have a drink sometimes, but I will very rarely drink more than a couple of drinks, and even then, and even rarer will I get drunk. I drink a lot of coffee, decaf, unfortunately, because of medication, but I will have a coffee, or in the case of CFC, because CFC is, as has been pointed out in the chat, ludicrously fucking expensive.
Yeah.
I default to blackcurrant and soda water, which is a relatively cheap drink to grab. It doesn't cost very much. It's very, very refreshing, and usually comes in a pint for a reasonable price. So I can sit there and I can just have a drink for a while. And a lot of Confuzzled, I don't know whether you saw me sitting around Confuzzled, was me sitting with a pint of blackcurrant soda, just chilling.
Yeah.
And
go on.
Yeah. And that's fine. Like, you don't have to drink. But I do think the kind of pressure really would on not drink. The pressure to drink would be less if it was in more spaces that didn't have that as a focus.
I would definitely agree with that. So like I don't drink lots either. I probably drink a bit more than you, given what you've said. But I mainly only drink socially. I might occasionally have a can of something at home. But I used to drink a lot more as a student, like what can I say, a typical student at the time. But like nowadays, I really don't do a whole lot. I don't enjoy the idea of getting drunk, of being drunk. Plus, it's expensive. Like, it might just be me, but I'd rather spend the money on other things. When it came to Confuzzled, I'll be honest, I was leaving the premises. There was a coffee shop at the train station that did cups of tea relatively cheaply. I kept fucking off and buying tea there. I was absolutely shocked at the poor options for drinks at Confuzzled. I will say that was probably one of my least favourite parts. The food options and the drink options were not good, and the prices were fucking insane. Like, I did not expect food and drink to end up being probably my biggest outgoing at Confuzzled. Like, it was just insane. When you get to a point where you're charging £10 for a glass of a drink, I'm sorry, but someone needs to be sat down and have words with how the economy works. But whatever, maybe I'm being a little bit overly pedantic there.
But one thing we like can't ignore in this discussion, however, is that having using spaces like this, like for instance Confuzzle being in the Hilton Metropole, it does add a certain degree of safety to the space, just based on the fact it is within a space that already has a lot of rules and regulations on conduct within it.
That is true. Yeah.
So, like for instance, Bromfurs happening in a bar in Birmingham. There will already be rules and regulations for behaviour within that area that will then kind of bring a certain amount of safety to the participants within it anyway. But then again, you could argue the same for cafes. So I don't know why I thought that would be a good argument.
No, there is definitely a level of argument there. So when it comes to the event running, places like the where Confuzzled was, they're used to running events and will have more processes to be able to handle things. If an incident arises, then they are going to be more prepared than, say, a cafe. Let's say you get someone who gets overly drunk and starts getting aggressive. A place like Confuzzled, I've forgotten where it was, the name of it, fuck. Somewhere like Confuzzled, the location will already have procedures for handling that situation because they'll have had it from other events. Compared to a cafe, they're not going to be as used to it. They're not necessarily going to have the processes or the personnel to handle an aggressive drunk person. So there are advantages to using using a location's resources. It does require a level of cooperation from like working with the event staff, working with the location staff, but there are those advantages. Just give a shout in chat if you want to use the game. Then it's left, right, up, and down. Typing those in chat to change your options, and then A to select. And when you get out of combat, I can't remember what it is. I think it's start in chat. Will bring up your sidebar if you all save the game. Sometimes it doesn't work. Ooh. Oh boy, sounds like I'm gonna have some technical issues to resolve later on. I'll look at that in a bit. Let me know if it gets too bad, Seth. There is a delay.
I've never had a stream where there hasn't been technical issues. I think that is just a streaming thing.
Oh, tell me about it. It gets worse when you start building stuff on. There's no cooldown on it, Seth. It's most likely a delay. I will tell you now, there will be about a 5-6 second delay, I think. part of the problem is, have you seen the Ranger Rebellion event I have on these streams?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
The answer's no. You would know it if you'd see it.
Yeah.
So you know the whole fighting monsters and that in the streams.
Yeah.
You can also fight bosses. It's disabled, but I have other people on for the reason for what I'm about to tell you. The bosses are Lakea, Looping, and myself. Which the chat as a community. Why is that not working? Oh, hang on. Oh, it worked that time. Seth, have you what? It doesn't like Seth's input for some reason. That's really fucking weird. I'll look at that in a minute, Seth. I really don't know what's going on there. I don't know why it doesn't like your name. Yeah, so the system is built so that when everyone beats all the bosses, the stream automatically triggers the Ranger Rebellion event to allow Twitch chat to take over the stream and play Pokemon for 15 minutes. So I just kind of hijacked that system to shoehorn this in instead of like building a proper system for it. And it's meant that the back end is, well, I'll save everyone the technical mumbo jumbo, but let's just say I'm looking at a lot of warnings in my Python script right now. But yeah, it's just the usual stream stuff. I'm really sorry, Seth. I don't know. If we get out of... I apologize, Vanguard. Just give me a minute to maybe experiment here. Right. Seth, if you start typing in like down or right or something now to see if you move, is it going to work? Is it just when you type A? Don't have... Oh, I can't view because the log's on that PC. Okay, so it's working there. Sorry, Seth, I don't know what the issue was. It was clearly being a bit of a bitch. Anyway, would you be okay if we take a short break here, Vanguard? Because I'm kind of desperate for a toilet. I would love to go and make a cuppa if you would like one.
I do not mind at all. I can go and refill my water bottle. So yeah, sounds good to me.
Awesome. So we're going to take a quick break here, guys. I will leave this game up so you guys can continue to play it as we go. I will just put up the little AFK text so that you know that we're AFK. And we'll be back in a few minutes. Have fun, guys. And we are back. So I hope everyone had a chance to grab a drink, go to toilet, everything like that. You guys seem to have found the Pokemon place, which is good. Well, hang on. Just out of curiosity, I'm kind of curious what Pokemon you all have. Lady, could you bring up the Pokemon? I'm curious how much grinding you've been doing. Honestly, this stream has really made me think about so many things, and topics and events are very open way. Thank you for joining us, Max. Honestly, I've been looking forward to this for ever since I first mentioned this. Like, I approached, it would have been after your talk of Confuzzle, wouldn't it, Vanguard?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've been looking forward to this for a long time because I feel really strongly about safety and communities and stuff like that. I think it's start bladed. I should probably add that to the commands on the Twitch place. There we go. Like some of the folks who have been with me for a while know that if something starts to threaten safety of our little community, at least, the jokes and fun drop away from me very quickly. So like seeing the stuff that Vanguard's been doing, like I really wanted to be able to share it, particularly as not everyone in our little community is part of the furry community. It's probably about a 50-50 split, I would say, for my followers, which is interesting.
I mean, you do end up finding that. I mean, I've found that, like, as my and this is kind of going back to what you were saying earlier as well. I found as I've become more openly furry, my followers have become more furry. It's the it's the byproduct of furry being what I do for the PhD as well. Everything's just kind of bleeding into furry. But the followers and kind of people I have that watch me regularly who aren't furries, they just enjoy the fact that I'm generally quite bad at games.
I think that's kind of the thing, is it? You don't have to be a furry to enjoy a furry content creator. Like, that's just an aspect of the content.
Yeah. Even if it is, some furry streamers aren't a furry necessarily when they stream.
Yeah.
Whether through not having VTubers or whatever.
You see, I find that interesting that you put it that way, because I don't think you need a VTuber or a PNGTuber or anything like that to say you're a furry streamer. Like, this comes back down to, like, how do you define furry again? For me, it's just, do you consider yourself a furry? Do you consider yourself part of the community? I know certainly when it comes to streaming and that, there's, like, this view by both streamers and viewers that you've got to have certain things to fit into certain communities sometimes. But I would generally say it comes down to what are you trying to be more than the assets you have.
Yeah, and like going further than that, and kind of bouncing back to what you said about what it is to be furry, I would say that is what it is. If you say that you are a furry, you are a furry. That is the point.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a persona. You don't have to have a fursuit. You don't have to have loads of art of your persona. If you do have a persona, you can have one that's you can have a persona that's like individually and kind of really uniquely designed to you, or just just a dog, an anthropomorphized dog. If you are a furry, as far as you're concerned, you're a furry.
Absolutely. Like, you don't, there's no requirement of assets or skills or to be creative or anything like this. Like folks saying in chat earlier about not necessarily being creative or whatever. Like, these are just different aspects of the community, and no one's going to fit into all of them. So it really is like, just what are you there to be, and are you enjoying yourself? So long as you're not hurting anyone, you're enjoying yourself, like, you are whatever you want to be. And it's certainly interesting when you talk to non-furs, because a lot of people have this idea it's only about the suits. And certainly I found that some folks are more open to like furries, or at least like accepting furries, when they realize that it's not just suits, it is just a community thing, and you do whatever it is you want to do. Hell, even just having a random picture from online that you've taken with a furry name as your gaming profile picture can have you defined as a furry. Yeah, I don't know where I was going to go with that. I did have a follow-on thought, but in the space of me saying those two words, I lost it.
That is a very familiar struggle. I know that very well. But the thing is, therein, like everything you've just said, I agree, but therein lies the rub. There is the problem. Because the furry fandom is so diverse in terms of interests, in terms of backgrounds, in terms of races, gender identities, because there is that diversity to the fandom, it makes it very difficult to make the furry fandom a safe space for everyone, if not impossible.
Because you've got
because there's always going to be someone,
haven't you?
Yeah, there's always going to be someone who feels less safe in the space for XYZ reason. That reason may not be logical. It may not even be a good reason, but they feel uncomfortable, and then that therefore makes it them feel not safe in that space.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah. So sorry, I have a really terrible habit of ending sentences with "and."
Don't worry about it. Especially when you know people are watching and listening in, it can be very easy to kind of like add things together, particularly for us lot with ADHD, because I don't know if you're like this, but my thoughts are still forming as I'm talking, and usually they string together fine, but occasionally they've just kind of stopped stringing together, so you're going and because your mind's still trying to put the final pieces together.
Yeah, not only that, plus also the when your brain has multiple kind of threads, it's doing it at the same time, and you end up just clipping onto another one, and you're like, oh no, I didn't need to be here. This is irrelevant.
Oh, absolutely. Streaming, I don't know why we do this, because it's so hard, isn't it? Because you've got like one thread kind of like talking to your chat, another thread like managing your OBS or your slobs or whatever you're using, a third thread trying to play the game. Like, I've said this on streams before when people have commented about how bad I am at games. Like, I suck at games, I'll freely admit that. But it's even worse when streaming, because you're trying to process so many things at once. Like, as you said, they just clip into each other.
And you can't help it either, which is the even fun, like more fun thing, because you've clipped into it and you may not even notice initially at all.
Yeah, it really is. Like, for me, I just kind of roll with it. If I stumble, it's like, yeah, whatever. Have a bit of a I'm not doing RTS games, Wolf Warrior. I cannot micromanage the same life of me. I sometimes do Age of Empires, to be fair, but I wouldn't go into a full campaign of them. I've forgotten what I was gonna say, and I feel like I've just answered my own question, but I don't know why.
Congratulations.
But yeah, it is absolutely, like, I absolutely love it. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, I just kind of like own it a little bit on streams. I know some folks get a little more self-conscious about it, and I can totally see why. But for myself, I've just started like going, you know what, we'll just roll with it and have a bit of fun. We were talking a little bit on Discord earlier about like the weird random stuff that I put together on streams, and how it's quite different to your streaming style. Like, we've got two very different styles of streaming, haven't we?
Yeah, and that's fine.
Absolutely,
that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's completely fine. Um, um, but like, what I mean, it's just that it comes down to, and it's the same thing we were saying earlier. Just do you.
Yeah.
Just do you. Like,
So long as you're happy and having fun, and no one's getting hurt, there is nothing wrong with what you're doing. Like,
yep.
It's how I view a lot of things. Like, it's what, like, come on, words. Just enjoy what you're doing. Have a bit of fun with it. I know whenever it comes to, have you ever had anyone come to you and ask about, like, how to start streaming or how to start making content at all?
I have indeed, yes.
I'd be curious to hear what you say, and it's like, I will have various bits of advice I'll give, but I also, like, my main thing I will always say is just have fun. That's the main thing. So long as you're enjoying what you do, doesn't matter about the rest. Doesn't matter if you have no one that watches it, or you don't think it doesn't come out very well, or like whatever. Like, so long as you're having fun, that's the main thing.
I would agree with that. Oh, trust the process. Yeah, trust the process. I mean that's a great piece of advice, just generally, bladed, regardless of literally regardless. But like, the one piece of advice I would give to streamers is, don't go whole hog straight away.
Yes, absolutely.
You don't need an expensive mic or a top end camera or any of that. Basically, just like feel it out, see how you feel streaming, and that stuff may be irrelevant to you. You may end up being a PNGTuber or a VTuber, which means you don't need a great camera. You just need a camera, or maybe not even that. You might not need all of these things, because you may find that you feel more comfortable doing something else, and that's fine.
I would absolutely agree with that, because you never know. You might start it and realize, you know what, I'm not enjoying this. I don't want to stream anymore. And then you've spent all that money. Like, I would say it goes for any hobby. We say the same for like HEMA, because like all the gear and all of that is very expensive. It's like, give it a go, see what you think first. And streaming is definitely a thing of that. And the other thing is, it's like, as you kind of alluded to, you don't know what your style of streaming is when you first start. You don't know what route you want to take. Do you want to have a PNGTuber, or do you want a web camera? Or do you want to focus on the gameplay? Like, what angle do you want to go there? Are you a streamer that focuses more on gameplay? Are you like really skilled at certain games and that's what you want to showcase? Or are you one that focuses more on the chat and interactivity and like chatting to people and stuff? Like, it's really about finding the way you work as a streamer, and everyone's a little bit different in these things, I feel. I do appreciate that Jack is saying do OnlyFans instead. I don't know about you, Vanguard, but it's not a platform you'll likely see me on anytime soon.
You wouldn't see me on it either.
Oh, maybe that's one for you, Jack, eh? Maybe we'll see you on there, or, well, maybe we won't, because I don't use OnlyFans.
But yeah, I mean, there's just and most importantly, do what you're comfortable with.
Yes.
Don't go chasing what other people are doing. Because you won't enjoy it.
Absolutely, yeah. I would have to agree. It's one thing, like, because I know I will sometimes like follow like what games are popular and see like what people are doing, but it's one thing to see that and think about it. If you think you might enjoy it, give it a go. If you don't think you'll enjoy it, as Vanguard said, do something else. Do what you're comfortable with. it's one thing to like see what's popular to see if you can use it to grow yourself, like grow your channel. It's quite another when you're like just trying to jump on the bandwagon and try and do it to get popular. Because another thing that I'll point out, I'd be interested to see you once again on this Vanguard, is people in the chat can usually tell if you're enjoying yourself or not. Like, it's not that hard to tell. You, like, looking at it from a viewer's perspective, you can usually tell when the streamer's getting bored or not enjoying it. And if the streamer's not going to have fun, your audience isn't going to have fun, and they're not going to watch you. So if you've got to pick, absolutely go with what you enjoy and what you're comfortable with.
Yeah. And that may end up being that you end up playing games that aren't the most popular ones and won't get you a massive amount of viewers, but the viewers it does end up getting will really enjoy what you do and will come for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it really is a case of finding your style. So it's like, most folks here will know what my style is. Like, I do, absolutely, Max, you are 100% right. I do a lot of Twitch interaction, so I interact with chat a lot. And I build big, fun, dumb systems for you guys to enjoy. Like, you get to go fight monsters or take over the stream by literally sidelining me, the streamer. Like, building daft things like that, because that's what I enjoy doing. And that's, like, my offering as a streamer. Like, other people will offer their own things with their own unique spins and such like that. Well, that's a very interesting question from Wolf Warrior there. How do I feel about dual wielding? As in, like, dual wielding two swords, like two short swords? Or dual wielding like a sword and a dagger? Sorry, my human mind kicked in there, Vanguard.
I was going to say, I mean, to be fair, those are two very different fighting styles.
They really are. Yeah, sword and parry dagger is beautiful. Interestingly enough, the dagger isn't what you parry with. You parry with the sword because the sword gives you a bigger edge. You've got more chance of blocking an attack, and then you'll step inside it and use your dagger. Two swords. Now, I have thought about that, Wolf Boy, and I would like to give it a go. However, there's not actually many manuscripts in history for fighting with two swords of the same size, at least that I'm aware of. I've not done a huge dig into it. Usually you would fight with blades of different sizes, because you'd use the bigger blade to block, as I said, and the second one would be able to step into, because then you can find the chinks in any armor. I was thinking of Renaissance dueling that stuff. Those dagger with teeth to catch blade. I'm not familiar with those blades, so I couldn't say at all. Also, sorry, Jack, you're not dual wielding those. Good luck with that. Again, I apologize. Being, like, again, the Wolf Ranger, like, sword fighting and survivor are kind of my two things. So, they're topics that come up a lot.
You're never going to get complaints from me.
I really need to get back to HEMA. Unfortunately, it's difficult for me to get to my club at the moment, and I am well out of practice. I'm probably, once I sort my garden out, I'm going to be training in my back garden again to get back into shape, because I am no longer capable of winning medals, I think. Oh boy. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. I'm sorry, I've really sidelined this now, haven't I?
No. Sideline is all good.
It's just a casual chit chat anyway, and certainly, like, I've appreciated you taking the time to join us. While I remembered, I meant to do this during the break, but I completely forgot. Please do go check out Vanguard. He is a fellow streamer, and he does do a lot of awesome content. You recently redid some of your graphics and that, didn't you?
Yeah, I got bored.
Oh, every
yeah, I got
ADHD bored. Ever. Sorry, carry on.
No, I mean, yeah, it most definitely is. It definitely is that. Um, and I had a dumb idea for the streams, and I was just like, you know what? I know I can do this. Uh, so I just went with it, and I ended up just completely changing everything, and kind of having a unique, kind of not unique, a kind of unified aesthetic, which I've not had before, where everything falls within the same sort of idea, and that was really fun. And I've gone with a, I mean, you've seen this, Materies. I've gone with a sort of retro TV.
It looks ace.
Aesthetic for everything, so like teletext and stuff like that. So, and it took me so long to get that teletext thing looking right. So long. But I'm glad I did it because it ended up looking really good when I finished. It's just, it took a while to get it to the point of me being happy with it.
This is the thing, like, this is the bits, these are the bits that viewers don't see, isn't it? Like, the behind the scenes work, like, the buildings of the graphics, the configuring of your streaming software, the setting up of your Twitch profile with your banners and everything. Like, there's an awful lot that goes into, like, streaming, and the actual streams themselves are only a small portion of what makes a streamer. And I think it's easy as a viewer who hasn't had to do it. It can be easy to forget that sometimes.
Yeah, but at the same time, the fact that it looks so seamless and looks so easy is a testament to the streamer.
That is true. Often. Yeah, that is very true. And I know I had a conversation recently with a friend of mine who's a good lad, really, but I'd be curious to see what you think of this. He said you wanted to get into streaming. I was like, okay, yeah, I can help you with that. And he was like, yeah, I thought it would be a good way of earning a quick buck.
It most definitely is not.
Yeah, I know, right? I was like, hold on.
And that's wrong on almost every level because it's actually really difficult to do.
Absolutely. Like, I end up pointing out to him that I have spent far more investing in my channel than what I've earned off it. Like, probably by 2 or 3-fold, realistically speaking.
Yeah, and that sounds about right, to be fair.
Yeah, like, it takes so much. Like, even if you make as much as you can by yourself, like, you still end up. It's unlikely you have the skill set to cover absolutely everything, and you'll usually end up, whether it's common people for emotes, whether you like buy a subscription to a streaming tool or like something else, you kind of want to invest in it a little bit because partly because it's your passion, you kind of want to, partly because like it helps build that engagement. Now, to make it clear, as we said earlier, you don't need to have these things. You do what you want and what you feel is best for your channel. But sometimes, like often over time, you'll find that you start to want to engage, like building your channel. At least this is how I feel. Again, I'd be curious to see what Vanguard says about this. Like, I find myself wanting to invest in it, not just money. I've invested a lot of time, like building a lot of these things for the streams. So you find yourself wanting to invest like the time or effort or money or maybe some combination thereof. And it doesn't matter if you lack in one, you can like try and make up for it in the others, so to a certain degree. What would you make of that, Vanguard?
I would agree. I mean, I'd say I've spent like in terms of what I've put into streaming, I'd say it's mostly time and effort more than anything else. Because I made the commitment to make sure that anything when it came to overlays or stuff like that, I would always do myself. that's a lot of time. And just streaming itself as well is a lot of time. Even if you end up streaming as you and I do, 3 hour streams, that's still 3 hours multiple times a week. That's still a lot.
Sorry, carry on.
No, that was it. That was the end of my sentence. It's still a lot.
Yeah, like I would argue it's actually more there, because if you stream 3 hours a stream instead of 8 hours, you've still got to put in almost as much effort behind the scenes to still build everything behind the scenes. So your ratio of effort off camera is more than your ratio on camera if you stream for longer, if that makes sense. But I would agree, like, I've put far more time into my channel than anything else. I won't lie, I have invested a lot of money as well. I'm fortunate that over time I've been able to do so. Like at this point, I won't lie, I know I've put 4 figures into this. But some of that is the hardware to build the things that I've done. So, for example, this game you guys are playing right now isn't running on my PC. It's actually running on a second computer. The Woodland Scene and Lakea and all the games you guys play on my streams, they run on a second PC while I stream off my main PC. So, like, that's where a lot of the financial investment has come from, while the time and effort has been building these systems. That's just the approach I've taken. Again, like, as we were saying earlier, everyone does it differently and they have their reasons. And this is just the steps I've taken to invest in my channel, for better or for worse.
Also, none of them are wrong. None of these decisions are wrong.
Absolutely.
As long as it works for you, it's not a wrong decision.
Absolutely. And I'm going to keep believing that, even though I know that the coding back end of some of these systems is absolutely fucking horrendous.
Oh, well, same with any system, full stop. There are so much spaghetti code and just disastrous, like, composition of programs out there.
There really is.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I have told you before, but I work as a software developer, so I should know how to build these things properly, and I do. And normally I hold myself to a high standard. And in fairness, most of these systems that I was building when I first started, they were quite well written. Unfortunately, as is common with these projects, scope creep slowly turned into more scope leaping, and you just end up... It's a bit like taking a wrench and just bolting on more bits to the car. Eventually, you just got Frankenstein's monster of a car, and that's what's happened with some of this.
Yep. I mean, happened with the rebrand of my Twitch as well. It started as sort of like I'll just update the overlays. No, I'll update the overlays and the stream schedule. Oh no, I'll update the overlays, the stream schedule, and also all of the other graphics on the thing as well. And it just spirals like that.
I feel like ADHD, like, it seems like I'm pinning a lot on this, but unfortunately ADHD is a bitch. Really doesn't help with that, does it? Because once you've got your focus on something, you don't stop thinking about it. It's on your mind, on your mind, on your mind. You keep going. Next thing you know, you've overhauled everything far more than what you initially planned.
Absolutely. And to be fair, like if we want to segue this back, it's the same thing with the Furry Fandom. It just keeps growing, and and the reason it keeps growing is because people enjoy it and because people want to see it grow. Same as us with Twitch.
Absolutely. Like, seeing these things grow over time, like, is absolutely amazing to see. I know one of the things I enjoy is, like, not just growing my own channel, seeing myself like grow, but also seeing like friends and that do it as well. So it's like watching streamers who I've worked with for like a few years now, watching them grow their audiences and stuff, and like seeing their successes. Like it all comes back to that community aspect. Like, we're all helping each other out. We're all here together. Like, we're all in different boats. We're not, like, all in the same situation. But we're all here wanting to enjoy what it is we're doing. So, we might as well try and help each other out where we can. And I've got to say, that is probably, like, it's a part of streaming that I do really enjoy. Like, a while ago, some folks will know I made a 3D scene for Liminal Gender, which was just a... I'm going to put my phone on silent, otherwise that's going to keep distracting me. My D&D group. I made that living room scene for Liminal Gender, and that was... I had loads of fun working with Liminal on that, and of course Liminal has been doing, like, voice lines for Lakea for us, so, like, we're collabing with other people, not just on stream, but also to produce different pieces of content is also just like a great feeling to have.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And also sometimes, I mean, I don't know how I don't know how this I don't know how or whether this even affects you. But I don't notice my own successes. So it takes other people to go, this thing. I'm like, oh, really? This thing? I had no idea. Like the other day on stream, one of my chatters and my mods said, "Congratulations on 400 followers." I was like, what? because I don't pay attention to that thing. Like, I don't pay attention to my numbers whatsoever. So having him come in and say, "Oh yeah, congratulations on that," and I was like, thank you. I didn't notice, but thanks. And that's the thing. I mean, and also, this is literally what you just said. It's like there's something gratifying about seeing other people's success if you care about those people.
Absolutely, like the whole working together and stuff like that. I'll be honest, I don't keep track of all my successes, but there are some things I do watch. Like, I watch my numbers a little bit. I don't fuss over them, because there's no point. Like, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. The people watching enjoy what I do. But I do like to see the numbers a little bit. I feel good when the numbers have a little bit of growth. But part of that is just because I've been making content for... how long? Over 10 years now. So, like, I've made content across multiple channels. So it's just, for me, it's being able to compare how I've grown from my first series of YouTube content to, like, the YouTube and Twitch content I do now. Like, being able to compare, like, comments, the community, like, the numbers, because for me it's all part of the same thing. Like, it's different aspects, the same thing, if that makes sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. How long have you been making content out of interest, like, or like whether on Twitch or YouTube or just all together?
I mean, I started streaming. The first time I started streaming was in 2018. No, earlier than that. Oh, God. Definitely earlier than that. 2015.
Amazing how quickly time passes, isn't it?
It absolutely is. But, like, I stopped doing it for a long while and then started doing it again, like, 3 years ago. And at that point, I came back to stream as, like, my human self, my quote unquote real life self. And then I made the pivot like 2 years ago to streaming as Van, and I've had a much better time since I switched to streaming as my persona.
It's a very similar timeline to me. Sorry, carry on.
And not just because it's been fun to stream as my persona, but like it also marked like several other kind of decisions in which I decided that I would just flat out stop playing games I wasn't enjoying. Doesn't matter how far through them I am, if I'm not having fun, stop playing. And that decision coinciding with streaming, bye Het, sleep well. Those two things coincided together just resulted in a far more enjoyable stream time for me. And I literally have a much better time now than I basically ever did before.
I can totally get that. I was actually in a similar position. So I've like made YouTube content across multiple channels and like streamed across multiple channels, but I actually was streaming more consistently back in 2020 for lockdown. That was streaming under my old gamer tag, but also as myself with like a web camera and that. As Stalery Scolia, and I streamed for about 2 years throughout lockdown, only playing one game. And for a long time I was enjoying it, but I ended up losing my enjoyment. One, because unfortunately the community around that game, it was a very niche game. I won't say were actively toxic, but there were certainly toxic people in it who were unfortunately in positions of power. I'd also got tired of playing like the same game over and over and stuff like that. So I stopped streaming for a while. And then about 6 months after that, I got back into streaming, same as you, as my son, as Materies. With similar line of thing, variety gaming instead. I'm not going to just play one game. I'll try and complete games, but if I end up not enjoying something or whatever, like, I'll leave it for a while, come back to it later on or whatever. Like, it, and since then, like, also, I made a commitment to, like, work with more streamers and, like, try and branch out and meet more folks and such. And since then, I've had a much more enjoyable time, like you. Like, I found I have far more fun. I'm not finding it as stressful or, like, as much hard work or anything. Even though I'm putting way more effort into it, like, it's just more enjoyable. And I feel like but what we've both said kind of links back to what we were saying earlier about trying to find how, like, finding the best ways that you can stream as a person, and why you don't want to go all in from the start, because you never know what's going to work best for you.
Yeah, and it's finding that point of comfort as well. Because I'm not sure about you, but I don't stream like big games generally. And if I do, I get to them really late in the day. Because I just play what I want, and that makes me feel comfortable, and therefore it is a far more enjoyable experience for me.
Absolutely. I've got a lot of games that I will do. I do take suggestions from the chat, so I've had a couple of people suggest games that I've tried, and for the most part, I have actually quite enjoyed them. But like, if I'm not so sure on the game, or if I start it and I don't enjoy it, then yeah, I'll put it down. Like, there's a couple of games that I keep going back to, even though I get mad at them, because so some of the games I've got are games that I never got to play as a kid, and I wanted to complete. So I keep going back occasionally for that reason. But even then, like, I will take breaks from them so that I'm not losing interest. And like, I will still do things that I'm enjoying, and if I lose that enjoyment factor, I will just put it down for the time being. And if I don't get back to it, I don't get back to it type deal. Because, again, I'd rather I was enjoying it and my stream were enjoying it, and if none of us are enjoying it, then why are we here type deal.
Absolutely. And the end result is you end up playing some really interesting stuff.
Absolutely. Like I've loved being able to go through games I never got to play as a child. So like I played Crash Bandicoot Remastered. I never got to play Crash Bandicoot as a kid, so I really enjoyed going through those. The third game was shit, unfortunately, but the others were
I'm gonna
good
take
at
the
least.
duct tape and do it on both sides of your
But then,
mullet and
so
leave
the other
only a rat
suggestions
tail.
that people have made as well.
Well, I get out of this. I'm duct
Devious
taping you
one,
to a
my
tree and leaving
followers
you there for the
actually
house.
bought me. Are you familiar with the game Ghost?
Shiny!
Ghost of a
Holy
Tail?
shit! Guys! Don't fuck this up!
I've never seen a shiny
That doesn't
in
ring a
this
bell, but I
game.
probably would know it if I
I've
was to
never
see
seen
it.
a shiny in this
It's like the
game.
name
Like,
sounds
you've
familiar.
never seen a
It's
shiny
the one
ever?
where you play as a little mouse with a musical instrument. You've got to explore like
Yes.
the world.
Yes. That is familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. He got me that, and I absolutely loved playing through that game. Like, a couple of minor remarks on it, but overall, I absolutely loved that, playing through that. So, like, being able to go through a variety, I do feel like this is one of the benefits of being a variety streamer. You've got more flexibility to do what you enjoy and go approach things how you want to enjoy them. Like, there is some more challenge. Like, you don't necessarily get the same consistent audience, because as you kind of hinted earlier, some games draw more audiences than others, and folks don't always stick around. But again, so long as you're enjoying it and you'll get those folks who do stick around, that's, for me, it more than makes up for it, and I absolutely love that aspect.
Absolutely. No notes. And also, as another odd thing, in that regard, you know what you've done? You've created a safe space. Because you have. Like, you genuinely have.
Oh. Okay, one, that genuinely means a lot, so I'm glad to hear you say that. It genuinely means more than I can say. But I laugh more at the fact how we've somehow come full circle during the stream. Like, it just worked really well in my mind, that.
Yeah. And it's because all of the topics tie to one another. It's really easy to tie them together if they are already easy to tie together.
Yeah, absolutely. They all link one way or another. I feel like this is how we can kind of move pretty fluidly between points. Even without like sitting and making notes or a plan or anything like that. Part of me did wonder if before this stream I should make some notes to like kind of ask you on a few things, but in the end I figured best to just let the conversation go where it naturally goes, because like I said before, it's more of an informal thing anyway. And I do feel like we've covered a lot of topics, and it seems like folks in the chat have really had a good time from this. So certainly on that one, thank you once again for joining me here. It's like I appreciate you taking the time to do so.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, literally from the moment you kind of this sounds. I'm aware that the words I'm about to use now sound far more aggressive than the circumstance actually was. But like ever since you kind of cornered me at Confuzzled and asked if this would be something I'd be interested in, like it's been something I've been looking forward to. Because being able to talk about what I do with someone who actually wants to hear about it, rather than the folks at uni who are just like, oh no, the fucking furries in the office again, is really refreshing and also really kind of welcoming. And what it does, and the best way to describe it is it galvanizes me. I basically, if I see and talk to people and they're very receptive to what I'm doing, like a Confuzzled, for instance, it means I can go away and be just like, okay, people want to hear the things that I'm doing, so I better keep at it. And it gives me a reason to continue if I ever feel down about what I'm doing or get imposter syndrome or whatever. It kind of stymies that. It stops that from happening.
It's definitely easier when you know you've got folks rooting for you. Like, yeah, you can get through by yourself because you know you can do it. You've got your own passion, you've got your own will, and you're committed to what you're doing. But it's still just having those folks around you, as you say, those folks who want to see what you're doing, who want to listen, who want to join in. It really just kind of helps ease some of the load off your mind. Not yet, Wolf Warrior. You want to keep going left. As far left as you can to the beach, and then you want to go up. Yeah, it really helps when you know... when you've got that backing behind you. Like, it just takes some of the pressures off your mind a little, I think. And absolutely, like... I mean, as I've said multiple times, I definitely enjoy and love what you're doing. Like, we've seen folks in chat say they really like what you're doing, and obviously your talk at Confuzzle was really well received. So yeah, I think it's great. I think the only real shame is that we have so few people looking at this stuff for the fairy community. Even if not necessarily from an academic point of view, I know yourself and some of the others, you're doing it academically speaking, but just having more folks around who would be more interested from even an informal kind of like investigation or research into a community, I think would really help benefit a lot of people.
Yeah, and you're completely right. The amount of people doing this is very, very low. Like in the UK, in terms of active research, I think I'm the only one, or at least I'm the only one who's been very vocal about it. Which is terrifying because it means that, technically speaking, I'm the authority in this country on that, and that is terrifying. But there are a few of us, but there's still not that many. Like, even if you include the scholars in the US and Japan and China, there still ends up being like less than 24 of us, I'd say. Definitely less than 24, but like we're very spread out, and we don't we don't have a very communicative academic community for furry, despite there being several of us.
It's definitely like, if you think how many furries there are, like how big was Confuzzled? Like, what was it, 4,000 people, I think they said? 4,000 people
like
just at Confuzzled, and that's just in the UK. Like, when you start looking at it across the whole world, you probably look at tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of furries. So the fact that there's only, about 24 people looking at it really kind of shows just how few people there are. But then, as we were saying, when you look at how many people are like turning up to your talks, how many people are getting behind some of you guys, it shows that the interest is there. And like, people want to see it. But whether it's a case of people just don't know about it, or don't know how to start it, or just too unsure of themselves to take that step forward, like, there's still that interest. People want to see it. I also like Jack's suggestion in Jack chat there.
I am not qualified for president of the furries. Let's get my doctorate first, and then we'll talk. Because when I'm a doctor of furries, I think that's a good step forward. Because that's what I will be, which is terrifying. A doctor of furry studies, essentially.
I mean, it makes sense though, and yeah, honestly, having that there, I think it's worth it. I know, like, you're like a little bit worried about it, but I reckon you'll be perfectly. I think you'll probably be a really good person for it because one, you've done that research, so you'll know what you're talking about, but also two, you've got that more open mind, which isn't. I know I can be. I try to be open-minded, but I know I can be a little opinionated sometimes. And a number of furries can be quite like that. It's very easy for people to do. You've demonstrated you've got that little more open of mind, because if you didn't, well, then you never would have thought to have studied the furry fandom for your PhD. Let's put it that way. So I think you'll be a really good person to take that spot.
Also, hyper, an unqualified president, unheard of. I know. I'm not 100% on American politics, and I do not want to get into that here. But yeah, when you're right, you're right.
That's a whole other conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, my word.
I suspect we both have very similar and very strong opinions on some of that, so maybe best not to go too far into that topic.
Yeah, true. But yeah, as I said before, and as I said earlier, I'm just glad to be part of this movement, because there's definitely more academic furries than there were, and furry in academia, generally speaking, is growing. I mean, I will tell you now, and this is a not so subtle plug, I'm part of that movement in more ways than one, not just because I am a member of that movement.
Absolutely plug away. Don't feel like you've got to hide it. Absolutely shout it from the rooftops on this channel.
Fair enough. Okay, so small announcement. Well, it's not an announcement. This was announced ages ago, but like small thing. I'm one of the organising committee for the first Furry Studies academic conference. There's not been one before, but I'm organising. I'm part of the organising committee for sorting this, which is happening in October in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. In October, I don't know whether I said the month. And organising that has been a incredible experience so far. I mean, obviously it's not happened yet, so you know, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But the response we received was far bigger than we expected. In the best possible way.
I'll be honest, if I hadn't have just bought a house tail end of last year and have been confuzzled, I would have absolutely been yeah, I'm buying a ticket, I'm being there. As it is, I'm still going to be trying to get that virtual ticket if I can. It just really comes down to what my budget will allow me to do. But if it wasn't for that, I would absolutely be flying over because I would love to see that.
I mean, it won't be the first. It won't be the last. I'm telling you that now.
Hell yeah.
All of the ancient furry history got burnt up in the Library of Alexandria. Jack, hold on to that thought because I'll come back to that in a second. Yeah, so that's happening in October in Rotterdam. In October, furrystudies.org is the website. Just as a little heads up. There will be online attendance if people want to just attend online and just watch the kind of papers and stuff. Because it's not going to be split across multiple rooms or anything. Basically, all of the papers will be on the same online streams.
There's a link in chat if you guys want to take a look.
Tickets aren't up on the site yet. They will be up by the end of this month. But yeah, it's gonna be a really cool event. I'm gonna be out there for it. Obviously, as one of the organisers, it's probably good for me to be there. But we've got. I mean, I can say this now without actually spoiling too much. But we've got papers from. But we quite literally got kind of a global representation. So we've got a couple of Chinese furry scholars. We've got a couple of Japanese. We've got America. We've got Europe, and we've got me. I'll be presenting there. So it's going to be a good thing. It's just sorting the rest of it is the problem. But like,
it's the paperwork, isn't it? Like the logistics of
yeah,
it is not easy.
Yeah, all of that nonsense. Especially since I'm not good at that stuff, thanks ADHD. So, it like organisation sucks. But I'm really looking forward to it just based on the fact that it is new. It is something that hasn't been done before. The paper I gave earlier this year, like a few weeks ago, on a furry studies topic that I gave at like a game studies conference, was the first kind of furry paper ever given at that conference, and that's like, wow, that's a big deal. And to be honest, I'm glad I didn't know how much of a big deal it was before I gave that paper, because I would have been even more nervous than I already was. But yeah, that's furry studies, the furry studies conference. Returning to what Jack said about the burning of the Library of Alexandria, though.
I was going to say, this sounds like there's something there, which sounds like a bit of a story.
It's not so much kind of like a big story. It's more that, like, one thing that the furry fandom's always been really bad at is keeping an eye on our history. I mean, you've got things out there like Joe Strike's book, Furry Nation, and the sequel to it, which was Furry Planet. You've got my friend Game Popper, their book Furtania, looking at the UK furry fandom history. But because a lot of furry history was essentially just like ephemera, it was like posters and printed fanzines and stuff like that. A lot of that has just decayed and disappeared or been destroyed. So we've ended up losing a lot of our history.
Isn't it? Like, not to say artwork is temporary, but like posters and that for events, like they kind of become irrelevant after the event's been and gone. They're not like more permanent pieces, are they?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, at the same time, they are kind of permanent pieces of our history that are just being lost because they're not being adequately like looked after. You do have like you do have folks that are trying to help with that. So you've got like the Furry Library, you've got Fang, Feather and Fin as well, who are all kind of pushing towards this. You've got who are all kind of pushing towards this kind of documenting our history, but they need help. So basically, anything I get physical wise, I will send to like Fang, Feather and Fin, for instance, for kind of like archival.
An interesting one in chat. Just because, as I mentioned earlier, not everyone who watches me is furry. Like, how far back does some of this go? Hyper mentioned like 80s and 90s. I know it goes like we've got stuff from earlier. Like furries have been a thing for much longer, but I don't know how far back some of it goes.
Okay, so I mean, there's different schools of thought on this. My personal take on it is that furry goes back to like the late 60s. Simply because in the late 60s, Mark Melino and Rod O'Reilly, who were two of the founding members of the furry fandom, they were frequenting science fiction conventions because they were both just huge fucking nerds, as most of us are. And they ended up finding a few kind of kindred spirits in kind of the late 60s, like very late 60s, early 70s. Kind of kindred spirits that were interested in anthropomorphic animals, because Marco Bellino, for instance, names kind of like Bambi as like one of his early kind of real interests. So they ended up kind of running sort of like these parties, which at the time, I think this was in the 1970s, they ended up forming kind of like this organization which they called the Cartoon and Fantasy Organization, and they would have kind of like showings of kind of obscure anthropomorphic media, like the Animal Olympics and Kimber the White Lion and stuff like that. That was quite hard to get hold of because it was all imported or small circulation, and they'd have watching parties for this. That then became the Cartoon Fantasy Organisation, and then later became known as Furry Parties in the 80s, I think. In the 80s, it became no. Furry didn't come into it until furry as a term didn't exist until the late 80s. But you could argue that these activities that like Roger Riley, Mark Molino, and other kind of essentially proto furries were doing. These basically were furry activities.
So it's what do you define as it? I thought it went back further than that because I remember seeing a picture online of like a Victorian fursuit, but I guess it kind of depends on at what point do you define furry being furry as we like. Are we on about furry as we know it today, or as you were saying earlier, like with times changing and that, would we be considering furry as in what would have been a furry back in the day type thing?
Yeah. I mean, anthropomorphism's been around for centuries.
Well, thousands
as a
of
fascination.
years. The ancient Egyptians had it.
Ancient Egyptians. Yeah, ancient Egyptians. Like, there's like anthropomorphism isn't new. I mean, bear in mind this is me putting a very arbitrary barrier and a very arbitrary definition around it, because you have to in academia. Actually, sometimes you just have to go, this is where I stand. I acknowledge the things outside it, but this is where I stand. I would say that there was a certain amount of codification of furry that happened around during the kind of 70s into the 80s, and then obviously the very first FurCon, like a very first FurCon, was in 1990. Well, there was kind of like a it was like 1990. I'm just trying to remember my dates, because I'm horrible with dates, ADHD. And like the thing that's most interesting about that very first FurCon is that a lot of the things that still occur at FurCons now, internationally, happened then as well. So, like, the very first FurCon had a comic book, it had an art auction, it had DIY panels, like how to make your own tail. Like, all of these things were there from the very beginning of furry, and they still exist now. It's amazing how quickly it became like a furry space kind of became articulated and kind of codified.
It really does show how quickly it's grown. So it's like, it makes sense that you try and like box it off, especially from an academic point of view, because like the whole point is academically you're trying to define and almost codify, as you say, what these things are. And with it being such a deep rabbit hole, you've got to draw the line somewhere.
Otherwise you'll just keep talking forever.
Exactly. As it is, as you've said before, there's that many different things that you can explore, whether it's the history, whether it's like the way people made the saunas or the safe spaces or whatever. Like, you've got to try and define the area you're working in, otherwise you'll never stop. But it's really interesting to like hear this, because it shows how much it's grown. So like the first on being only in the 90s, and here we are 30 years later, and we have conventions with over 4,000 people in, like Confuzzled did. It really shows how quickly it's like spread. I mean, that realistically means that fairyism isn't really much older than the internet. If you think that realistically became widespread in the 90s, and this is I think you said about 80s for like the actual start, roughly. Like, it really shows how much it's exploded in time.
Yeah, absolutely, and you can if you and this is kind of well documented by far more knowledgeable about this particular aspect folk than myself, but you can actually see a kind of concurrent timeline with the internet and furry, because a lot of the kind of technological advancements that came through, furries would jump onto. So, for instance, kind of the early advents of the internet, when you had kind of like BBS kind of platforms or multi-user construction kits, those sorts of places, furries migrated onto them, because that it was a place that they could be their persona, or rather describe their persona, because it's a text-based game. But you've got those space that they would migrate to those spaces to allow for communication with what was not only a growing community, but even then a disparate community in terms of placement. They weren't living near each other, especially once furries started to leave the US as well, and you've got the UK as well. So you just ended up with furries all over the place, which then need a means to communicate with each other.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, that blows my mind a little bit. Like, just sat here thinking about it, because I'm trying to think of like other things that have like grown in this kind of time space, and I can't think of any other communities off the top of my head that have grown quite as quickly as this. I mean, even if you look at things like scouting and that, like, that's been around for over 100 years. To be able to get to where it is. So for furries and that to have grown this quickly is really quite impressive. Especially when you consider like some of the negative things we get in media about us now. Like, overall, it just kind of blows my mind a little bit.
And it's still growing. That's the thing. What's the most recent one? Was Anthrocon the most recent one in the US?
I don't.
I think it was
the US
Anthrocon.
ones, unfortunately. I couldn't tell you.
I think the most recent one was Anthrocon. I think that had like 14,000 attendees or something.
14.
That is a quite frankly insane. That's a quite frankly insane number of people. The UK fandom, it's becoming it's starting, and I've had this concern for quite a while actually, especially as a furry academic, someone who's looking at the fandom in the way that I do specifically. The UK fandom, in terms of its growth, is starting to become a bit concerning because we're running out of spaces we can inhabit. For instance, like the Hilton Metropole, Bromford, not Bromford, Confuzzled. Confuzzled is the biggest UK con.
Yeah.
It's starting to become a bit untenable, it remaining where it is. However, in terms of because we're too big for that space, and yet that's the biggest kind of space of that nature in the UK. There's not a bigger
It's
one.
hard to go to a bigger space. This is like the difficulty in running events. Like, you've got to be able to scale up as your attendees scale up, and it's not as simple as just moving to a new location. The amount of prep work and that it goes into it. So yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from. It is not easy to do, and I know there are some fur meets that realistically are too big for their location as well. But it's not easy to move them. So it is a reason, because the issue is you do hit a point where you can't necessarily keep running. You have to either limit the spaces, which people get unhappy with, or you just can't run anymore, which would obviously be quite negative to the furry space. So I can certainly see where you're coming from as it being a reason for concern. Like, growth is usually a good thing, but it does bring with it challenges. And if you're not able to overcome these challenges, it can have a negative effect.
Yeah. And to once again, I seem to have become the master of this on these streams. I wish I was capable of doing this on my own streams. To bring it back to the to a point I made earlier as well. Unless those challenges are kind of observed and are kind of combated, you end up losing the safety of the space, because you've not, as you worded it, you've not grown the scope of the space as the space has grown. So because of that, you are running the risk of the space becoming potentially significantly less safe, because you can't scale in that way. And
yeah,
not only that, like with more people, becomes more things you need to consider to make that space safe.
Absolutely. As you were kind of saying earlier, with like the diversities and stuff like that, there's no way of making a space truly safe, but it's like a case of managing risk. Like, is it a really high risk, or is it like a really low risk? You end up hitting a point of what's acceptable, which I realize sounds bad to some people, but unfortunately that you can never guarantee absolutely that nothing will ever absolutely happen, because it only takes one person with like indecent thoughts and something happens. But it's like bringing it down to a minimum level where everyone is at very low risk of anything happening. And yeah, as you were just saying, like, you get to a point where if you're getting too big for your space, suddenly that risk starts to grow, and it gets higher and higher, and it becomes harder and harder to manage. Like, where do you draw that line of realizing that there's now too much risk to your attendees, or too much risk to people in the community in that as well? Especially when you consider that, like, some people are more risk than others. It's not a flat line for every person. Some people are going to be more vulnerable to certain things than other people might be.
Yep. And now it might be obvious to you why I'm having so much fun / trouble with this PhD, because of exactly that.
Absolutely. Like, I already knew what you were taking on was a pretty big beast, but it's only become more clear to me as we've been talking for like the last 3 hours over how much of a challenge it's been. Like, you've been on this for what, like 3 years? And I could easily see this being like a 30-year thing. Like you were saying earlier, you're in this for the long haul at this point.
Well, yeah, I have to be. Because things will keep changing, and have changed even since I started. Because a few years ago, I probably would have never questioned that the furry fandom is a safe space, because I was told it was, and I've seen that, you know, it's welcoming and whatever, and I wouldn't have even questioned it. But it's having learned more about safe spaces, having learned more about the furry fandom, and examining it and kind of focusing on it in the way that I have, has really made me actually go, actually, is it? And if it's not, can it be? And if it is, what's making me question this? And it's all of those things that have made me just go, okay, so maybe this was a good thing for me to concentrate on for the past 4 years. And there's more to do as well. It's not even as if this whole safe spaces thing is the only thing I'm interested in with the furry fandom. I mean, I'm also interested in the creation of the persona, because there's a lot of nuance in that. And also, I'd like, one of the things I've written down in one of my notebooks, and I will return to at some point, but time. It is like this idea of pandering, like this like this idea that I've heard a lot of furries mention um, about furries having problems with games that have furry characters in them, because they feel like they're being pandered to, almost in a sort of like a similar sort of discussions to sort of like gay baiting, and that's interesting.
That feel of misrepresentation in some ways, isn't it? Like, have they done us like a just service, or have they like taken a piss a little bit?
Yeah, or are they basically just creating furry characters to get furry money? Because quite frankly, a lot of furries are very rich. So, and there's a lot of money in furry. I mean, Fortnite have fucking learned it, haven't they? Because look how many furry skins there are.
They pivoted very quickly once they figured that out, didn't they? Like,
they know. Also, I mean, not only is it a case of money, but it's essentially free advertising. Because how much do furries create fan art of, say, like Wendell? Like, there's a lot of money in furry, and when companies aren't disgusted with the concept or bowing to whatever weird media depictions currently going on, they are going for that money, and that should be approached and kind of viewed with some sort of skepticism as well. Every company's out for your money. You are completely right, Hyper. But it's that targeted. It's that targeted kind of out for your money that people take umbrage with.
Yeah, there's the thing is, businesses are there to make money. At the end of the day, that people need to live. Like, we live in a capitalist world, whether you like it or not, and people need money to live. But there's a difference between, okay, we're going to make it a good product so people buy it from us. We're going to do the best we can. And, okay, what's the best way we can make money from people's hands? It doesn't matter how good the product is, just so long as we get paid our money. Like, that, it's usually pretty easy to see the difference in those two views from, like, a company based on, like, what actions they take.
And reverting back to what closed captions just referred to, the chlorine attack, that's a really good example of the sort of stigma that I'm trying to fight. But the real weird thing about that chlorine gas thing is, unless I'm mistaken, and please correct me, anyone, if you have further information, but I don't think that's ever been fully explained what happened. The fact that people got hurt is the point, actually, and people should have never got hurt. But like, how did that happen in the first place? Is the worry, and that caused, obviously, whether the space is safe into question again. So if things like that can occur, so it just keeps coming around. And also, yeah, those news anchors can sod right off, because that was handled so maliciously by the media, and that's the sort of thing that I'm trying to push back against, is that stigma, and is that kind of negative portrayal of furries insofar as however they decide to paint us this kind of month, I guess.
Yeah, that's something that really does truly anger me. Like I was saying earlier, people for starters, not feeling safe to be able to be themselves, but then it goes to a whole new level when you're actively laughing at people getting hurt. Chlorine is a horrible thing to be attacked with. Like, I used to do work on an outdoor pool. I would work with like chlorine powder and that, and I'll tell you now, even just a little bit of that powder up your nose, you knew about it. To get a full chlorine gas attack is truly horrendous, and I'm pretty sure against the Geneva Convention to attack a public space like that. And yet, to laugh at someone, like to laugh at people's pain, it doesn't matter who those people are. That is just pure evil in my mind, like pure disregard for another living being. Yeah, no, like the way that was handled by the media was truly horrific. Not just by the companies, but also sometimes you can tell when it's just a company and the people are there are only doing it because they need to get paid. Other times the people there are just as complicit as the company themselves. I would say when you as a news anchor are sat there laughing because a furry has been gas attacked, you're complicit in that evil, I would say. That might be a strong opinion, so I realise if you don't want to address that, Vanguard, I sometimes give hot takes, but that would be my personal opinion on that.
I mean, I don't think you're I don't think anything you said is particularly incorrect. And to be fair, that once again, that kind of plays into everything we've been discussing.
Aye.
This holding essentially making the furry fandom not only safe for us but safe for people, because people that and this does happen quite often actually at the Brumfurs meet, for instance, is non-furs spending time in furry spaces. I don't only want a furry space to be safe for furries.
It should be safe for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be safe for everyone regardless of who they are. If you're in a furry space and you're a non-fur and you're making it less safe for others through whatever reason, whether it be harassment or whatever, then you should be ejected from that space. But if you just want to be there and you want to learn, or you just want to hang out with some furries, because quite frankly, yeah, we are weird, yeah, we are cringe, but often, not all the time, we're really fucking fun to be around.
Yeah.
So, sure, spend time with us. That's great. And I would like spaces to be safe for everyone who walks into them, regardless of whether they're furs or not. But
I would agree. Ooh, go on.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly that. I would just it's being aware of that and trying to make sure those things stay as a consideration and at kind of like the forefront of our minds.
Absolutely, and this is going to be another bit of a hot take for a lot of furries that I'm about to say, but I think part of that is we should stop using the term normie.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, guys. I know a lot of furries like to use this term, but it's not a good term. You want to be accepted by people who are not furs, and now we have the term normie that I'm afraid if you're not a furry and you get called a normie, that comes off as passive-aggressive. If you don't want to be branded as some weirdo asshole, don't call them a normie. I will defend furries as much as I can, but at some point, we also have a certain responsibility to not be assholes ourselves. Sorry, I ran out of breath there. We have a responsibility not to be assholes ourselves, and I do think this term comes across as very passive-aggressive, and it's not us helping ourselves. So I do think that it's why I don't use that term. I absolutely will say non-furs or something similar to that effect. Because I think if we're using terms that come off as passive-aggressive, that is naturally going to put people against us before we do anything else. And it's something that I think more furries should be aware of. It's one thing to not care about other people's opinions. It's another thing to be calling them passive-aggressive names that can upset them. Again, I'd be curious on your take on that, Vanguard.
I agree. We can't what it comes down to is it's the same thing as anything in life, really. You can't expect civility if you're not willing to give civility.
Exactly.
You can't like you cannot expect for you to be respected in just existing if you're not willing to accept others for being them. Like it's a two-way thing.
It's mutual respect, isn't it? As you say it, two-way, exactly.
It is. It's exactly that. It's mutual respect, and I mean, you could argue the same goes for furries with other furries.
Absolutely.
Just shows some mutual respect for each other. So, but it's exactly that. It's exactly what you say. Like, if we as a community, speaking as the future president of furries, if we as a community want to be accepted by non-furs, the first thing we need to do is respect that we ain't that fucking special, and the first step is respecting others too. And that comes, and not only does that mean like respecting others in the space, that also means respecting spaces that aren't ours.
Absolutely, I 100% agree.
So, for instance, just small call out here, small ranting call out that I'm just about to do. If you're a furry and you're attending something like Confuzzled and you are graffitiing or otherwise kind of damaging the hotel or the grounds that Confuzzled happens in, just leave. That's not showing respect for the space you're in. That's not showing respect for even the community and the amount of time that the community spent building up the respect and acceptance of that space to be able to use it continually. Just leave.
Absolutely seconded. Could not agree more. And again, if I see you doing stuff like that, I will call you out on that. And if you don't believe me, ask my chat. They will tell you that I am stubborn enough to do it. Like, as you say, it's that respect, and it does unfortunately cause issues for others. Talking of respect, just a slight sidewinder. Who the fuck named one of the Pokemon Mattress? When the fuck did that? You know what? I'm not getting into that rant right now. But anyway, it absolutely, you've got to have the respect for others. It, like you say, oh, I'm not hurting anyone. That what you mean is you can't see that you're hurting anyone. It doesn't mean you're not hurting people that you can't see. Like with the graffiti, somebody's got to go clean that up. And then the hotel will quite easily decide with furries are going to start graffitiing and damaging our place. We just won't have them here anymore. Before you know it, that's a con shutdown.
And it's happened.
Yeah.
Exactly that has happened.
So we've got a couple of things in chat that I'd like to address, and then we'll probably look at winding up soon. Hyper, unfortunately, there are some furries who are like that. I believe you're in the US, aren't you? I will say that US furries and UK furries are very different. I'm probably not the best person to go into the specifics, but there is unfortunately a bit of an issue, and I believe it's worse in US circles, though don't quote me on that. Anything you want to say for that, Vanguard, before I move on to the next one?
Every community internationally has its problems. And what bonuses and what kind of benefits come with different communities are going to be changed by are going to be kind of like counterweighted by the problems with those communities, and it's all affected by the cultures of the country and the cultures of the people in general. It's definitely a thing. And also Hyper, I did remember you actually saying that you were Dutch, because you mentioned that the Furry Studies Conference is new to you.
I feel like such an asshole. I'm gonna leave now.
Like the kind of there's going to be certain cultural and certain kind of well, basically just certain cultural differences which are going to change how each aspect of the furry fandom operates and interacts with one another. And one of those is that it's just and not only that, the lack of kind of personal awareness of personal space, but also going back to what me and Materies were saying earlier about a lack of just basic respect for each other sometimes, which is a arguable international problem for the furry fandom. Well, not just the furry fandom, but humans in general.
Yeah. I'm probably going to point that one there just so we can go to the next one. I'm sorry, I don't want us to go too late because still got work tomorrow. To address Cat's question, there's a big overlap between the two. Between the LGBT circle and the furry circle, there's a very large overlap. Furries are almost exclusively either LGBT or neurodivergent. You are, I won't say it's impossible, but you are unlikely to find a non-LGBT furry who isn't neurodivergent. I fall into the neurospicy category. I'll let Vanguard say if they like to in a moment where they might fall. But neurospicy, I don't know where I picked that term up, but I got it from somewhere. But yeah, it is very much a large overlap. You could almost say you're looking at one circle almost. Again, anything you'd expand on that one, Vanguard?
Yeah, can do. The statistically based on the Fur Science studies, at least, which are American based, so pinch of salt in terms of how widely these can be applied to the rest of the international furry community. But the furry fandom does have a far larger than average presence of LGBT and presence of neurodiversity. That is something that's been documented in several studies. It's I mean, I wouldn't say that furry's been kind of like gay since the beginning, to put it in like really blunt terminology, but I think you can argue that there's at least been the kind of influence, or at least a kind of feeling from that degree since the beginning, since Rod O'Reilly, Mark Molino, the two folks I mentioned earlier, bisexual partners. So you've got that. You've kind of got that queer underlying kind of influence there since the beginning.
You can definitely see how that helps lean into it. Because with those two kind of being a big at the start and being like bisexual partners themselves, it means a lot of the folks around them, especially at that time with where like LGBT was and stuff like that, most of the folks that they had around them were most likely queer themselves. So you can definitely see how the two have kind of like run almost hand in hand there.
Or at least allies.
Absolutely.
At the very least.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, I would never say that you have to be even neurodivergent or LGBT to be a furry. Anyone can be a furry. It's just that, as Vanguard said, there is a very, like, statistically a very large overlap, and you will see a lot of folks in the fandom who usually go one way or the other. So yeah. They like to hang out. LGBT is all about acceptance, pretty much. It would be interesting to see more studies into that. But I heard there are more transgender people in the fandom than straight people. It sounds very surprising. I wouldn't be surprised, Max. I don't know if Vanguard's got any stats on it, but I know I'm a straight man. And I've not met many straight folks in the fandom. I know there are some, but most are LGBT. It I think I've said before, it actually makes me laugh a little bit that as a straight white cis man, I'm the odd one out in this community. Like, less so since I realised that I'm neurodivergent, but like, I'm still the odd one out to a certain degree, which does make me chuckle a little bit. Anything you'd like to add to that before we wrap up, Vanguard?
Sure. I mean, once again, First Science stats take with a pinch of salt because they're based in America. But based on the statistics, there isn't more transgender folk in the furry fandom than cisgender folk, but the percentage of transgender folk per capita versus the general public is a lot higher. I think the last study I saw, it's 3 times higher than the general public. So it's not that it's not so much that there are more transgender folk than cisgender folk in the furry fandom. It's just there are far more of them in the furry fandom than anywhere else. So it's more noticeable, obviously. Cis per capita, yeah, precisely. But yeah, there's more of them, and there's many reasons for this. But and I'll essentially make this my last point, unless something else big comes up. But there's something. One thing that a couple of furry scholars have kind of looked into and kind of started to explore is the idea of this creation of the persona, and the kind of self-discovery that causes, and that the journey that takes you on. There have been instances, and in fact there is one, if you ever read Furries Among Us 2, I think it is, which is a book of collected chapters written by furries. There's a chapter in it, I think it's Furries Among Us 2, that is written by a transgender furry who discovered that they were transgender as they were developing their persona. And in a way, and what they ended up doing is they ended up transitioning alongside their persona in kind of real time, which is fascinating, and so interesting. And I can't say definitively. I'm not in every community, so I can't really say this definitively, but I'm struggling to think of another community that has that sort of, that has an activity that's so intrinsic to that community that would allow that sort of exploration.
I think the only one sorry to jump out, I think the only one that I think could maybe come close would maybe be theatre and performance, having some similar ties, but I don't think it's quite the same as furry, because they're not your characters. The only other one that I could potentially see would be D&D, as you build characters there, but D&D players tend not to get as attached to their characters as furries do, so I don't know how many folks would necessarily see there. That would just be my personal take. I think Vanguard's right. I think just due by the nature of what making your persona is, I can totally see how people would use that to kind of grow themselves. I mean, I've done it with bloody ADHD, so look how that's turned out. It makes sense. Anyway, as a Twitch chat want to speed run this final battle, we'll look at wrapping up there. Before we finish, Vanguard, would you like to advertise yourself and the Expo thing in October a little bit? Like, where can people find you?
Sure. Okay. So, as a means of reintroduction again, hi, I'm Vanguard the Husky. You can find me as Vanguard the Husky on Twitch, or Vanguard Husky on Blue Sky. I am on Twitter as well, Vanguard Husky, but I'm using that less and less because of reasons, obvious reasons. So you can find me in those places. So I stream 3 times a week. I'm a variety streamer. I play essentially, whatever the hell I want. So that will end up usually being odd things or things that have been out for years or whatever. I've just recently finished Golden Sun, for instance. So there's that. I'm also a furry academic, obviously, looking at the furry fandom. You can find pretty much everything I've done. It's not quite up to date. I still need to add one more thing to it on my research blog, which I think is currently it's due to change, but it's currently under a WordPress one. So I think it's like rubermount.wordpress.com, I think, or something like that. So it's on there. And then finally, the Furry Studies Conference, which I'm on the organising committee for, which is going to bring together furry academics from essentially across the world to discuss the topic of what is furry, which is happening October 18th in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Tickets will be going on sale, which anyone can attend. You don't need to be an academic. They'll be online and also in person tickets, which will go on sale at the end of this month. And you can find information about that and the tickets when they go on sale at furrystudies.org. Oh, don't forget future president. Thank you, Hyper. I need to add that to my bio.
Absolutely. I want to see that on your bio. Future furry president. I'd vote. You've got my vote. Alright guys, so yeah, please do go check out Vanguard. As we've been saying for the stream, he's doing an absolutely amazing job of researching into the furries community. It is something that I know, as I've said, I feel quite strongly about, and there are others who are doing a lot to support him. So please do go check him out, his streams, his social media, and do check out, what was it, furrystudies.org, was it?
Yep, that's the website, yeah.
Yeah, please do go check that out. In the meantime, thank you very much for joining us. It has been an absolutely amazing stream, as always. What am I doing? We'll be back on Thursday doing some Cat Quest 2 then. No stream this weekend because I am away. But we also have we'll be finishing off the D&D stream on, what was it? The 10th of next month. I've forgotten what month next month is. But yeah, once again, thank you to Vanguard for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on.
You are very welcome, and thank you everyone for the kind words in chat as well. It's genuinely been a pleasure, and also all of your questions have been amazing, so thanks.
Awesome. All right, guys, we're going to call it there. So thank you very much for joining, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.